At the family dinner, my daughter-in-law came up to me and whispered, "I'm pregnant with your husband's child." I just smiled and kept my hands folded in my lap. I did not scream. I did not throw my glass across the room. I did not give her the satisfaction of watching a 67-year-old woman break apart in front of the people she had spent her entire life feeding, forgiving, and protecting. But what I did next made her face lose every bit of color. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end. And comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached." I used to believe family dinners were sacred. Not fancy, not perfect, just sacred in the ordinary way American families understand without needing to say it out loud. A warm kitchen, too many coats piled on the guest bed, children running through the hallway with socks sliding across hardwood floors, someone asking if there was more gravy, someone else laughing too loudly from the living room. That Saturday evening was supposed to be exactly that. A simple family dinner at my son Daniel's house in Naperville, Illinois, about 40 minutes outside Chicago. He had just been promoted to regional director at the logistics company where he had worked for almost 14 years. And his wife Vanessa insisted on hosting a celebration. She wants to do something special, Daniel told me over the phone earlier that week. I remember standing in my kitchen when he said it, looking out the window at the bare maple tree in my backyard. March had come in cold that year. Not freezing, but the kind of damp Midwest cold that gets into your knees and stays there. "That's kind of her," I said. And I meant it. At least, I wanted to mean it. Vanessa and I had never been close. But I had tried. For 12 years, I had tried. I had brought soup when she was sick. I had watched the children when she and Daniel needed a weekend away. I had remembered her birthday, her favorite flowers, the brand of coffee creamer she liked, even though she never once remembered mine without Daniel reminding her. Still, she was my son's wife. So I kept trying. That afternoon, I spent nearly 3 hours preparing my contribution to the dinner. I made my baked chicken casserole, the one Daniel used to request every Sunday after church when he was a boy. I also made an apple crumb pie because my granddaughter Lily loved the topping more than the filling and always picked at it with her fork when she thought no one was watching. I dressed carefully, too. At 67, I no longer dressed to impress anyone. Those days had passed quietly, without ceremony, but I still believed in showing respect for an occasion. I chose a soft gray dress with pearl buttons and a navy cardigan Richard had bought me on our 40th anniversary. Richard, my husband. 41 years of marriage. When I came downstairs, he was already in the foyer, checking his phone. "You ready?" I asked. He looked up too quickly, like I had startled him. "Yes," he said, "let's not be late." There was a time when Richard would have told me I looked beautiful. Not every day. He was never the type to speak in poetry. But on evenings like that, when I had taken care with my hair and put on the earrings he gave me years ago, he used to notice. That night, his eyes passed over me like I was a chair in the hallway. Useful, familiar, not worth studying. I told myself not to be sensitive. Women my age become experts at explaining away small hurts. We call them stress. We call them work pressure. We call them, "he's just tired." We find softer names for sharp things because we are afraid of what will happen if we call them by their real names. The drive to Daniel's house was quiet. Richard kept both hands on the steering wheel, even though he usually drove with one hand resting near mine. His phone buzzed twice in the cup holder. Both times, he glanced down before turning the screen over. I watched the reflection of passing streetlights slide across the windshield and said nothing. By the time we pulled into Daniel's driveway, the house was glowing. Every window was lit. 2 cars were already parked along the curb. Through the front window, I could see movement inside. Children darting past the curtains. Adults gathered near the kitchen island. Someone lifting a glass. For a moment, my heart softened. This was what I had wanted. Not money, not gifts, not grand gestures. Just my family in one room. Daniel opened the door before we rang the bell. "Mom," he said, pulling me into a quick hug. "You made the casserole." Of course I did. He kissed my cheek. then clapped his father on the shoulder. Richard smiled at him, but even that smile seemed strained. Vanessa appeared behind Daniel a few seconds later. She looked perfect. She always did. Her dark hair was swept into a low twist. Not a strand out of place. She wore cream-colored pants and a green silk blouse that made her look polished but effortless. The way women in magazines look when they pretend not to be trying. Her nails were painted pale pink. Her perfume reached me before she did. "Margaret," she said warmly, opening her arms. She never called me Mom. Not once in 12 years. I had stopped hoping for it around year 5. "Vanessa," I said, letting her kiss the air near my cheek. Her hand rested on my shoulder for half a second too long. "You look tired," she said softly. There it was. Not cruel enough for anyone else to notice. Not kind enough to be concerned. Just a little needle. "I'm fine," I replied. She smiled. "I'm sure you are." The house smelled of roast beef, garlic, and expensive candles. On the kitchen island, Vanessa had arranged little dishes of olives, cheese cubes, crackers, and grapes. There were flowers in the center of the dining table. White tulips, my favorite. For one foolish second, I thought maybe she had remembered. Then I saw her glance at Richard. And Richard glance away. It was so quick that anyone else would have missed it. But wives notice tiny things. A pause before an answer. A shirt that smells different. A phone turned upside down. A laugh that comes too easily for someone else and too rarely for you. I noticed Richard standing closer to Vanessa than he needed to when she opened a bottle of sparkling cider for the children. I noticed her fingers brushing his wrist when she handed him a glass. I noticed the way he did not step back. Still, I told myself what women like me always tell ourselves. Don't make a scene. Not tonight. Not at Daniel's celebration. The dining room looked beautiful. Vanessa had set the table with gold-rimmed plates and folded navy napkins. Daniel sat at the head of the table, glowing with the pride of a man who had worked hard and finally been recognized. Beside him sat Vanessa, smiling like the queen of the house. Richard and I were placed across from each other. Not beside each other. That bothered me more than it should have. For 41 years, at every family dinner, every wedding reception, every church banquet, every neighborhood barbecue, Richard and I sat together. It was such a small thing. A habit, a silent declaration. We came as a pair. That night, Vanessa had separated us. I looked at the place card in front of me. Margaret. Just Margaret. Not Mom, not Grandma, not Mrs. Ellis. Across the table, Richard's card read Richard. Vanessa's handwriting was elegant, slanted, deliberate. I ran my thumb along the edge of the card, then placed it down. Dinner began with laughter. Daniel told a story about his first week at the company years ago, when he had spilled coffee on a client file and thought he would be fired. Everyone laughed. I laughed, too, because I remembered that day. I remembered him calling me from the parking lot. 24 years old, trying not to cry, telling me he had ruined everything. "You haven't ruined anything," I had told him then. "You made one mistake. Now go back inside and fix it." He had. That was Daniel, my son, my boy. The child I raised while Richard worked long hours building his construction business. The boy whose science projects I helped glue together at midnight. The teenager I waited up for when he missed curfew. The young man I prayed over when he proposed to Vanessa. Watching him that night, I felt a painful kind of pride. He was happy. Or at least, he believed he was. The children were there, too. Lily, 10, sat beside me for most of the meal, showing me a bracelet she had made from blue beads. Her little brother Mason, 7, kept sneaking rolls into his lap like no one could see him. "Grandma," Lily whispered, "Mom said I can't have pie unless I eat green beans." "Then you better eat 3 green beans," I whispered back. She giggled. That small sound steadied me. For a little while, I almost relaxed. Almost. Then Vanessa stood to refill water glasses. She moved around the table slowly, gracefully, touching Daniel's shoulder as she passed, smiling at guests, playing the perfect hostess. When she reached my chair, she leaned down as if she were going to ask whether I needed more ice. Her perfume wrapped around me. Her lips came close to my ear. And then she whispered, "I'm pregnant with your husband's child." The room did not stop. That was the strangest part. Daniel kept talking. Mason kept picking at his roll. Someone in the living room laughed at something on the television. A fork clicked against a plate. Ice shifted in a glass. The world went on as if nothing had happened. Only I had been cut open. I stared straight ahead at the bowl of mashed potatoes in front of me. My hands were folded in my lap beneath the table, and I watched my knuckles turn pale from the pressure. For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood. At 67, you begin to doubt your own hearing. People talk softly. Televisions get louder. Doctors ask whether you have trouble understanding conversations in crowded rooms. Maybe she had said something else. Maybe the words had twisted in the noise. But then I looked up. Vanessa was standing beside Richard now. She poured water into his glass, though it was already nearly full. Her eyes lifted to mine across the table. She smiled. Not wide, not obvious. Just enough. Enough to tell me I had heard correctly. Richard did not look at me. That told me even more. My throat felt dry. I reached for my water glass, but my hand trembled slightly. So I stopped. I placed both hands back in my lap and pressed my feet flat against the floor. I had learned many things in my life. How to stretch 1 pound of ground beef into dinner for 4. How to smile politely when someone insulted you in church. How to keep a household running when money was short. How to sit in a hospital waiting room and bargain silently with God. But in that moment, I learned something new. There is a kind of pain so sharp it becomes quiet. It does not make you scream. It makes you still. Vanessa returned to her seat beside Daniel. My son smiled at her, completely unaware. "Everything okay, Mom?" he asked suddenly. Maybe my face had changed. Maybe a mother's pain creates a shadow even when she tries to hide it. I looked at him. My beautiful, hard-working son. Sitting beside the woman who had just whispered the ugliest sentence I had ever heard. "Yes," I said, "everything is fine." Vanessa lowered her eyes to her plate. I saw the corner of her mouth lift. She thought she had won. That was her first mistake. Dinner continued. I passed the salad when asked. I complimented the roast beef. I helped Lily cut her chicken into smaller pieces. I laughed softly when Mason knocked over his napkin and pretended it had attacked him. All the while, I watched. That is what Vanessa did not understand about women my age. She thought silence meant weakness. But women who have survived decades of marriage, motherhood, bills, grief, illness, and disappointment know how to sit quietly in a room and see everything. I saw Richard check his phone under the table. I saw Vanessa's foot move slightly beneath the tablecloth, toward his side. I saw Daniel reach for her hand and miss the way she pulled away just half an inch before letting him take it. I saw a marriage being betrayed in front of me. Not just mine. My son's, too. That realization hurt in a different place. It was one thing to know Richard had betrayed me. That pain belonged to my own heart, my own history, my own foolish trust. But Daniel? Daniel had built his life around Vanessa. He believed in her. He defended her. He excused her sharp comments and called them stress. He explained her coldness as shyness. He trusted her with his children, his home, his future. And she had sat beside him at his celebration dinner carrying a secret that could ruin him. I wanted to reach across the table and take his hand. I wanted to say, "Son, look carefully. Look at the woman beside you. Look at your father. Look at what they have done." But I did not. Because I had no proof. Only a whisper. And women like Vanessa survive by making older women look emotional. Confused. Jealous. Dramatic. I could already hear her voice if I accused her then. Margaret misunderstood me. Margaret has been under stress. Margaret is getting older. Margaret has always had a problem with me. No. I would not give her that weapon. So I sat there and smiled through dessert. The apple pie tasted like paper in my mouth. Lily ate the crumb topping first, just as I knew she would. Daniel made coffee. Vanessa cleared plates with exaggerated cheerfulness, humming under her breath. At one point, she passed behind my chair again. This time, I turned my head slightly before she could lean down. Our eyes met. For the first time all evening, her smile faltered. Only for a second. But I saw it. Good, I thought. Be careful now. When we finally stood to leave, Daniel hugged me at the door. I'm really glad you came, Mom, he said. His voice was warm, tired, innocent. I held him a little longer than usual. He laughed softly. You okay? I pulled back and touched his cheek. I love you, I said. His expression softened. I love you too. Behind him, Vanessa watched us. Richard was already outside, standing near the car, looking down at his phone. As I stepped onto the porch, cold air hit my face. It helped. It made the world feel solid again. Vanessa followed me out with my empty casserole dish wrapped in foil. Margaret, she said sweetly, handing it to me. Thank you, I replied. Her fingers tightened around the dish before letting go. Then she leaned in one last time, so softly no one else could hear. You should start preparing yourself, she whispered. Richard wants a new life. I looked at her for a long moment. Under the porch light, she looked younger than me. Of course she did. Smooth skin, bright eyes, a body still untouched by time in the ways mine had been. She thought youth was power. She thought a secret was power. She thought my husband was power. Poor Vanessa. She had confused attention with loyalty. She had confused desire with devotion. And worst of all, she had confused my restraint with defeat. I smiled at her. Not kindly. Not warmly. Just enough. Then I said, you should be very sure of what you think you know. For the first time that night, she did not answer. On the drive home, Richard said almost nothing. The silence between us was no longer empty. It was crowded with everything I now knew. Streetlights flashed across his face. He looked older than he had that morning. Smaller, somehow, not because he had aged in a day, but because the truth had stripped something from him. I kept my hands folded around the casserole dish in my lap. After 41 years, I knew the rhythm of his breathing. I knew when he was angry, when he was tired, when he was hiding something. That night, he was afraid. Not of me. Not yet. But afraid of being discovered. When we reached home, he parked in the driveway and turned off the engine. Neither of us moved. Finally, he cleared his throat. Vanessa seemed happy tonight, he said. It was such a strange thing to say that I almost laughed. Instead, I turned to him. Yes, I said, she did. He nodded once, then got out of the car. I watched him walk toward the house we had bought together 32 years earlier. The house where we raised Daniel. The house where I had planted tulips every fall. The house where Richard had once carried me over the threshold laughing because we were young and broke and believed love would be enough. I sat in the car a few seconds longer. Then I looked down at my hands. They had stopped shaking. That was when I understood something important. The worst part had already happened. Not the betrayal, not the humiliation, not Vanessa's whisper. The worst part was realizing I had spent years making excuses for people who had mistaken my kindness for ignorance. I walked inside slowly. Richard had gone upstairs. I could hear the floor creak above me, then the faint sound of the bathroom door closing. I stood alone in the kitchen and placed the casserole dish on the counter. The room was dark except for the small light above the stove. Its yellow glow touched the cabinets, the sink, the framed family photo on the wall. In that photo, Daniel was 22. Richard still had more brown in his hair than gray. I was standing between them, smiling like a woman who believed she knew the shape of her life. I looked at that woman for a long time. Then I opened the drawer beside the refrigerator and took out a small notebook. It was the notebook I used for grocery lists, doctor appointments, and reminders to buy stamps. That night, I turned to a clean page. At the top, I wrote the date. Then I wrote 4 words. Vanessa, Richard, family dinner. I paused, listening to the quiet house around me. For the first time in years, the silence did not frighten me. It focused me. Below those 4 words, I wrote everything I remembered. The whisper, the look, the phone, the way Richard avoided my eyes, the way Vanessa touched his wrist, the second whisper on the porch. Every detail. Every word. Every small movement that had seemed harmless until it wasn't. When I finished, I closed the notebook and placed it in the back of the silverware drawer beneath the old serving spoons no one used anymore. Then I went upstairs. Richard was already in bed, turned away from my side. For 41 years, I had slept beside that man. That night, he felt like a stranger who had broken into my life and worn my husband's face. I changed quietly, brushed my teeth, washed my face, put my earrings in the little ceramic dish on my dresser. Then I lay down beside him and stared at the ceiling. I did not cry. Not then. Tears would come later, maybe, in the shower, in the grocery store parking lot, while folding one of his shirts and remembering the man I thought he was. But not that night. That night, I listened to Richard breathe and made myself a promise. I would not confront him without proof. I would not warn Vanessa. I would not let Daniel be destroyed by a truth delivered carelessly. And I would not let anyone turn me into the foolish old woman in their story. Vanessa had whispered her secret because she wanted me to crumble. Instead, she had handed me the first thread. All I had to do was pull. By morning, I would begin. I did not sleep that night. I lay beside Richard in the dark, listening to the quiet sounds of the house we had built together. The furnace clicked on. A branch tapped lightly against the bedroom window. Somewhere down the hall, the old floorboards settled with the same small groan they had made for 30 years. Everything sounded familiar. Nothing felt familiar. Richard slept with his back to me. Or pretended to. I could not tell anymore. There was a time when I knew every inch of that man's silence. I knew when he was thinking about work. I knew when he was worried about money. I knew when he was carrying pain but did not want to burden me with it. Marriage teaches you a private language if you stay in it long enough. But that night, his silence was not the silence of a husband. It was the silence of a man hiding in plain sight. I stared at the ceiling until my eyes burned. Vanessa's words kept returning to me, not all at once, but in pieces. I'm pregnant. With your husband's child. Richard wants a new life. Each sentence landed differently the second time. The first had shocked me. The second had hollowed me out. The third had made something inside me go very still. A new life. As if the old one had been a coat he could take off and leave behind. As if 41 years of marriage were just clutter in the hallway. As if I had not stood beside him through everything. I remembered the first winter after we bought this house. The pipes froze twice. The kitchen ceiling leaked. Daniel was 3 years old and had a fever that would not break. Richard had been working 12-hour days, trying to keep his small construction company alive. And I had been cleaning offices at night so we could make the mortgage. Back then, we used to sit at the kitchen table after Daniel fell asleep, counting bills under the yellow stove light. Sometimes there was not enough money. Sometimes I pretended I was not hungry so Richard and Daniel could have the larger portions. He knew. He always knew. And he would reach across the table and squeeze my hand. One day, he used to say, "I'll make all this worth it for you, Maggie." Maggie. He had not called me that in months. Maybe longer. At 3:17 in the morning, I stopped pretending I might sleep and got out of bed. Richard did not move. I put on my robe and went downstairs barefoot, careful to avoid the third step because it creaked loudly. I did not turn on the kitchen light. I stood in the glow from the stove and looked at the room around me. The casserole dish was still on the counter. Vanessa had handed it back to me with that perfect little smile. As if returning a dish after dinner made her civilized. I washed it slowly. The warm water ran over my hands. The scent of dish soap filled the sink. I scrubbed a spot that was already clean because I needed something ordinary to hold on to. That is what betrayal does to you. It makes the smallest tasks feel like ropes thrown into deep water. Wash the dish. Dry the counter. Fold the towel. Breathe. I placed the casserole dish in the cabinet, then opened the silverware drawer and took out the notebook I had hidden there. Vanessa, Richard, family dinner. The words looked too simple for what they carried. I read through what I had written the night before. The whisper, the way Richard avoided my eyes, Vanessa touching his wrist, the porch, her final warning. Then I added more. Richard's phone face down in the car. His refusal to look at me when I came downstairs. The place cards separating us at dinner. Vanessa not drinking wine. The way Daniel reached for her hand and she delayed before taking it. I wrote everything. Not because I wanted to be dramatic. Because women like Vanessa depend on confusion. They depend on emotion. They depend on the older woman sounding hurt, jealous, unstable. I would not give her that. If the truth was going to come out, it would come out clean. By morning, the sky outside had turned pale gray. The kind of gray that comes before a cold spring rain. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with both hands around the mug. When Richard came downstairs at 6:40, he was already dressed. Khaki pants, blue button-down shirt, the leather belt Daniel gave him 2 Christmases ago. He looked like he had somewhere important to be. On a Sunday. "You're up early," he said. "So are you." He paused near the coffee maker. "I have to check on a job site." I looked at him. For years, that sentence would have meant nothing to me. Richard owned a construction consulting business. Job sites were normal. Early mornings were normal. Last-minute calls were normal. But lies often wear the clothes of old habits. "On Sunday?" I asked. He poured coffee without turning around. There was an issue with the flooring delivery. "The flooring delivery?" "Yes." His voice tightened slightly. I nodded and took a sip of coffee. He waited, maybe expecting another question, maybe expecting the old Margaret to ask if he wanted breakfast, if he needed his jacket, if he would be home for dinner. I did none of those things. Instead, I said, "Drive safely." He turned then. For the first time that morning, he really looked at me. There was something cautious in his face, something measuring. "Are you all right?" he asked. I almost smiled. Men are strange that way. They can build a wall brick by brick, then act surprised when you notice the shadow. "I'm fine," I said. The same answer I had given Daniel at dinner. The same answer women have given for generations while holding themselves together with thread. Richard left 10 minutes later. I watched from the kitchen window as his truck backed out of the driveway. He did not head toward the interstate, where most of his job sites were. He turned left. Toward downtown Naperville. Toward Daniel and Vanessa's neighborhood. I stood there until his taillights disappeared. Then I picked up my phone. My first instinct was to call Daniel. My thumb hovered over his name. I wanted to hear his voice. I wanted to ask if Vanessa was home. I wanted to warn him that the life he trusted might already be cracking beneath his feet. But I stopped myself. Daniel loved his father. He loved Vanessa. And love can make people defend the person holding the knife. No, not yet. Instead, I opened my messages and found Emily's name. My granddaughter had texted me a photo 2 weeks earlier of a book she was reading for college. She was 19, studying psychology at Northwestern, sharp-eyed in a way that reminded me of my own mother. I typed slowly. "Emily, sweetheart, are you free to come by today? I need to ask you something private. Please don't mention it to anyone yet." I stared at the message for almost a minute before sending it. Her reply came 5 minutes later. "Of course, Grandma, is everything okay?" I looked at those words. Everything okay? Such a small question. Such a large answer. I typed back. "I'm not sure yet. That's what I need to find out." Then I placed the phone on the table and opened the notebook again. For the first time since Vanessa leaned down beside my chair and whispered her secret, I felt something other than shock. Not peace. Not strength. Not yet. But direction. And sometimes, direction is enough to keep a woman from falling apart. Emily arrived a little after 11. I saw her car pull into the driveway through the kitchen window. A small blue Honda with a dent near the back bumper that Daniel kept promising to fix. She sat inside for a moment before getting out, both hands resting on the steering wheel, her head slightly bowed. That told me something before she even knocked. Emily was not confused. She was afraid. I opened the door before she could ring the bell. "Grandma," she said, stepping inside quickly. "What happened?" She was wearing jeans, a northwestern sweatshirt, and her hair pulled into a messy ponytail. At 19, she still had the softness of a girl, but her eyes were already old enough to notice things people wished she wouldn't. I kissed her cheek. "Come in, sweetheart." She looked past me, toward the stairs. "Is Grandpa home?" "No." Her shoulders dropped just a little. Relief. Small, but clear. I noticed that too. We sat at the kitchen table. The same table where Daniel used to do homework. Where Richard and I had once counted bills. Where I had written Vanessa's name in my notebook only hours earlier. I made tea because my hands needed something to do. Emily watched me fill the kettle. "You're scaring me," she said quietly. "I'm sorry." "Is it Mom?" She said it too quickly. I turned from the counter. Emily's face changed the moment she realized what she had revealed. Not much, just a tightening around the mouth. A quick glance down at her hands. But it was enough. I carried the mugs to the table and sat across from her. "Why would you ask that?" Emily wrapped both hands around the mug but did not drink. "I don't know." "Yes, you do." She looked toward the window. Outside, the sky was still gray. A thin rain had begun to fall, tapping softly against the glass. For a while, neither of us spoke. That is something I have learned about truth. It does not always come when you chase it. Sometimes you have to sit quietly enough for it to stop hiding. Finally, Emily whispered, "I've seen things." My chest tightened, but I kept my voice calm. "What kind of things?" She swallowed. "Things between Mom and Grandpa." Hearing it from Vanessa's mouth had been one kind of pain. Hearing it from my granddaughter was another. I looked down at the tea. Steam curled up between us. Thin and fragile. "Tell me." Emily's eyes filled, but she blinked hard. I didn't know what it meant at first. I thought maybe I was being weird. Or dramatic. Mom always says I read too much into things. Of course she did. People who manipulate others always train them to doubt their own eyes. "When did it start?" I asked. Emily took a breath. "Last fall, maybe, around Thanksgiving. Mom started asking me to watch Mason and Lily more often, saying she had errands or volunteer meetings. But sometimes I'd see Grandpa's truck when I drove past downtown." "Where downtown?" She hesitated. "There's a small office building near Washington Street. Brick front, across from that coffee shop with the green awning." I knew the place. Richard had rented a storage office there years ago when his business was expanding. He claimed he gave it up after the lease ended. Apparently, he had not. Emily reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. "I didn't want to tell anyone because I didn't know what I was seeing. And Dad," her voice broke a little. "Dad loves her so much." "I know. He thinks Mom is perfect." "No one is perfect, sweetheart." "I know that, but Dad doesn't, not with her." She scrolled through her photos, then placed the phone on the table and slid it toward me. The image was taken through a car windshield. Not perfect, a little blurry from distance, but clear enough. Richard's truck was parked along the curb outside the brick office building. Vanessa stood beside the passenger door, wearing a long beige coat. Richard was facing her. His hand was on her waist. Not friendly. Not innocent. Not something a father-in-law should ever do. I did not touch the phone at first. I only looked. The rain tapped harder against the window. Emily said, "I took that in January." January. 2 months ago. While I was home making soup because Richard said his stomach had been bothering him. While I was washing his shirts. While I was buying his favorite coffee. While I was still sleeping beside him believing distance was just what happened after 41 years. "Is there more?" I asked. Emily nodded, almost ashamed. She showed me another picture. This one was from a parking lot outside a hotel near Oak Brook. Vanessa's car was there. Richard's truck was parked 3 spaces away. Neither of them was in the photo. I followed Mom once, Emily said, voice trembling now. I know I shouldn't have. But she told Dad she was going to a charity planning meeting. And then I heard her tell someone on the phone she'd be there by 2. She sounded different. What do you mean? Emily looked at me. Younger. That word sat between us. Younger. I understood exactly what she meant. There is a tone some women use when they are pretending life has not asked anything difficult of them yet. A lightness, a sweetness, a little performance. Vanessa had always performed well. I waited in the parking lot for almost an hour. Emily continued. Then Grandpa came out first. Mom came out about 10 minutes later. I didn't take a picture of them together because I panicked. She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. I felt disgusting, like I had walked into something I wasn't supposed to know. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. You did nothing wrong. But I didn't tell anyone. You were a child being forced to carry an adult secret. I'm not a child. No, I said softly, but you are still someone they should have protected. That made her cry. Quietly. No dramatic sobbing, no loud breakdown, just tears slipping down her face while she stared at the table like she was embarrassed by them. I got up and brought her a tissue. She took it and whispered, I'm sorry, Grandma. Those words almost undid me. Not Vanessa's whisper, not Richard's lies, not the photographs. Emily apologizing for pain she did not create. I squeezed her hand. You have nothing to be sorry for. She nodded, but I could tell she did not believe me yet. We sat together in the kitchen while the rain moved down the windows in thin lines. For a moment, I felt the shape of my family changing around me, not breaking all at once, not exploding like people imagine. No. It was quieter than that. A granddaughter at my kitchen table with proof on her phone. A husband somewhere he had lied about being. A daughter-in-law who thought pregnancy gave her power. A son who had no idea the ground beneath him had already split. Emily looked up at me. What are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? A younger woman might have driven straight to Daniel's house. She might have stormed through the front door and thrown the phone in Vanessa's face. She might have demanded answers from Richard the moment he returned. But I was not young. And I had learned that some truths have to be placed carefully. Or the wrong person bleeds first. I'm going to protect your father, I said. Emily blinked. From Mom? From the way the truth could destroy him if it comes too fast. She looked down. He won't believe it. Maybe not at first. He'll say it's a misunderstanding. I know. He'll defend her. I know that too. Her voice hardened slightly. Then why protect him? Because I am his mother, I thought. Because mothers do not stop being mothers just because their children are grown enough to be fooled. But I did not say all of that. I only said, because when his life falls apart, I don't want him to think everyone was waiting to watch it happen. Emily nodded slowly. Then she unlocked her phone again. I can send you the pictures. Not by text, I said. She looked surprised. Why? Because I don't know who looks at whose phone anymore. That sentence made her go still. The old Margaret would not have said something like that. The old Margaret trusted first and checked later. That woman had left the family dinner last night carrying a clean casserole dish and a dirty secret. I got my laptop from the small desk in the hallway. Emily helped me create a private folder and copied the photos onto a flash drive she had in her backpack. She showed me the dates attached to each image. January 14th. February 3rd. February 27th. 3 dates. 3 little cracks in the wall. Then she paused. There's one more thing. I looked at her. What? Mom has been asking Dad about the house. My house? Emily nodded. She asked him if Grandpa had ever talked about selling it. She said it was too big for you too. She said once the baby came. She stopped herself. But I heard it. Once the baby came. The room seemed to narrow. Vanessa had not only planned to take my husband. She had already started imagining where she would put the furniture. My furniture. My son's childhood home. The kitchen where I had stood at 2 in the morning with fever medicine. The staircase where Daniel had taken prom photos. The backyard where Richard and I planted tulips every fall before he became a stranger. I felt something cold and steady move through me. Not rage. Rage burns too fast. This was different. This was clarity. Emily whispered, "Grandma?" I closed the laptop and placed my hand on top of it. "Thank you for trusting me. What if Mom finds out I told you?" "She won't." "But if she does?" I looked at my granddaughter. Really looked at her. The fear in her eyes. The loyalty pulling her in 2 directions. The burden adults had placed on her young shoulders because they were too selfish to carry their own shame. "If she does," I said, "she will answer to me." Emily stared at me for a moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. By the time she left, the rain had stopped. I watched her drive away, then returned to the kitchen table. The house was quiet again. But this silence was different from the one that had kept me awake all night. This silence had weight. Evidence has weight. I took out my notebook and turned to a new page. Under the date, I wrote, "Emily came over. Photos saved. Vanessa asking about the house." Then I sat back and stared at the words. For 12 years, I had tried to earn Vanessa's kindness. For 41 years, I had trusted Richard's loyalty. For my entire life, I had believed that if a woman gave enough love to her family, love would eventually return to her. That morning, sitting alone at my kitchen table, I finally understood. Love is not payment. Sacrifice is not protection. And silence is only dignity when you choose it. Not when others force it on you. I looked toward the front window. Richard's truck was not back yet. Good. I picked up the phone and called the only person who had known our finances longer than Richard himself. Mr. Howard Bennett. Our attorney. Mr. Howard Bennett answered on the 3rd ring. "Bennett and Cole," his receptionist said, her voice bright and practiced. "This is Margaret Ellis," I said. "I need to speak with Howard. Please." There was a small pause. "Mrs. Ellis, 1 moment." That pause told me she recognized my name. Richard and I had worked with Howard Bennett for almost 30 years. He had handled the paperwork when Richard incorporated his construction consulting business. He helped us update our wills when Daniel married Vanessa. He even sat at our kitchen table once after my father passed, explaining my inheritance in a voice so gentle I cried halfway through and felt no shame for it. Howard knew the shape of our life. Or at least, the legal shape. A minute later, his familiar voice came through. "Margaret," he said, "it's been a while." "Yes," I replied. "I'm sorry to call on a Sunday." "You wouldn't call unless it mattered." That almost made me close my eyes. There are people in life who hear one sentence and understand there is another one underneath it. Howard was one of them. "I need to ask you something," I said, "and I need this conversation to stay between us." His tone changed immediately. "Are you safe?" The question was simple. It landed heavily. I looked around my kitchen. The clean counters, the family photo on the wall, the tulips outside, still waiting for spring. Nothing looked dangerous. That was the cruel part. "Yes," I said, "I'm safe." "All right, then tell me what you need." I tightened my hand around the phone. "I need to know what Richard can do without my signature." There was silence on the other end. Not confusion. Recognition. Howard had heard enough families collapse to know what that question meant. "Regarding what assets?" he asked carefully. "The house, the company, our retirement accounts, anything connected to my inheritance from my parents." Another pause. Then he said, "Come to my office tomorrow morning." "I'd rather know now." "Margaret. Please." The word came out softer than I intended. Not weak, just tired. Howard exhaled. "All right, I can give you general information. But I'll need to review the documents before I say anything final." "I understand. The house in Naperville is jointly owned." But if I remember correctly, a portion of the purchase and later refinancing protection came from your separate inheritance. There were clauses added because your father insisted on it. My father. I had forgotten that. Or maybe I had not forgotten. Maybe I had simply trusted my marriage enough to stop thinking like a protected woman. Dad had never fully trusted Richard's business risks. He liked Richard well enough, invited him fishing, shook his hand at holidays. But my father had been a quiet man who believed love and paperwork should never be confused. Before he died, he told me, "Maggie, a good man won't mind you being protected, and a bad one will mind too much." At the time, I thought he was being old-fashioned. Now, standing in my kitchen with a phone pressed to my ear, I wished I could hear his voice one more time. "So Richard can't sell the house?" I asked. "Not without you." "Can he borrow against it?" "Not legally, not without your consent. If he tried, there would be a paper trail." I wrote that down. Not legally. Paper trail. What about the company? "That's more complicated," Howard said. "Richard operated it, but some of the original capital came from your inheritance. We documented it as a marital contribution with protected reimbursement language. Again, I need to review the file. But if there's been unusual transfer activity, I'd want to see it." I thought of the LLC name in the bank record. The one with Vanessa listed as a secondary contact. "There has been transfer activity," I said. "How much?" "I don't know yet. Enough to notice." "Do you have statements?" "Some." "Bring everything tomorrow. Bank records, password access if you have it. Any letters, emails, property documents. And Margaret?" "Yes?" "Do not accuse anyone tonight." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was exactly what I had already decided. I wasn't planning to. Good. People who think they've gotten away with something often become careless if they believe no one is watching. I looked down at my notebook. Vanessa had been careless. Richard had been careless. They had mistaken my quiet for blindness. "I understand," I said. "And one more thing," Howard added. "If there's a possibility of financial misconduct, stop signing anything you don't fully understand. No refinancing papers, no tax documents, no medical forms giving broad authority. Nothing." My stomach tightened. Medical forms? It's standard advice. But his voice was too careful. I knew careful voices. They meant the worst possibility was standing quietly in the corner of the room, waiting to be invited by name. "I'll be there tomorrow morning," I said. 8:30. Use the side entrance if you prefer privacy. After we hung up, I remained standing beside the counter. The house was silent. For the first time since the dinner, I let myself feel the full weight of it. Not all at once. That would have crushed me. Just enough. Richard had not merely betrayed our marriage. Vanessa had not merely whispered something cruel to wound me. They were planning. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not intelligently, but they were planning around me. Around my age, around my trust, around the assumption that I would be too embarrassed, too emotional, or too tired to protect myself. I went upstairs. The bedroom door was open. Richard's side of the bed was unmade. The blanket twisted where he had thrown it back. His watch box sat on the dresser. His closet door was halfway open. Everything looked normal. I stood in that doorway and remembered another morning 26 years ago. Daniel was 11. Richard had just landed a major contract. The one that changed everything for us. We had gone from worrying about the electric bill to finally breathing a little easier. That morning, Richard came into this very bedroom, lifted me off my feet, and spun me around like we were still 25. "We made it, Maggie," he said. We. That was the word that hurt now. We had made it. But somewhere along the way, he had started saying my business, my money, my house, my time, my life. Vanessa had not created that selfishness. She had only found it and fed it. I walked to Richard's dresser. I did not throw clothes onto the floor. I did not search wildly. I opened drawers carefully, the way I opened everything now. Top drawer, socks, undershirts, a small box of cufflinks Daniel gave him. Second drawer. Old receipts. A charger cord. Golf gloves. Third drawer. There. Under a stack of sweaters he rarely wore. I found a folder. Plain manila. No label. I took it out and sat on the edge of the bed. For several seconds, I only held it. A woman knows when paper is going to change her life. Inside were copies of documents. Not originals, copies. A printout from a bank I did not recognize. A draft agreement for a private loan. A document with the name of the LLC I had seen the night before. And a property valuation for our house. Our house. Not a casual estimate printed from a website. A professional valuation, recent, dated 3 weeks earlier. I read the amount twice. Then I read the loan document again. Richard had not signed it yet. Neither had I. But my name was typed there. Margaret Ellis. Spouse. Consent required. Consent required. Those 2 words steadied me more than any prayer could have. They still needed me. That was why Vanessa had whispered at dinner. Not simply to hurt me. To shake me. To make me emotional. To make me reckless. To make me confront Richard. Fracture the marriage openly. And perhaps push me into signing something just to get away from the humiliation. Or maybe she wanted me to leave. An older woman walking out of her own home in shock. A husband claiming abandonment. A family confused. A younger woman stepping into the empty space with a baby and a story. My hands went cold, but they did not shake. I took photos of every page with my phone. Carefully, one by one. Then I placed the documents back exactly as I had found them. Same order. Same angle. Same sweaters on top. I had spent decades keeping a home. I knew how to return things to their places. Downstairs, my phone buzzed. A text from Richard. Flooring issue taking longer than expected. Don't wait lunch. I stared at it. Then another message arrived. This one was from Emily. Grandma, Mom just asked if I knew whether you seemed upset last night. I said you seemed tired. I closed my eyes. Vanessa was checking. Good. Let her check. I typed back. You did well. Say nothing more. Then I opened Richard's message and replied. No problem. Take your time. I looked at those words for a moment before sending them. Take your time. Let him believe he still had it. Let Vanessa believe her whisper had left me broken and confused. Let them both keep walking forward with their eyes on the life they thought they were building. Because now I had photographs. I had dates. I had a lawyer. And I had one thing Vanessa did not know about women who have been underestimated for too long. We may bend for years. We may forgive too much. We may swallow words that should have been spoken. But once we finally see the truth clearly, we do not unsee it. That afternoon, Richard came home smelling faintly of cologne I had never bought him. He kissed the top of my head as if nothing in the world had changed. Long morning, he said. I'm sure, I replied. He walked to the refrigerator and opened it. I watched him from the table. My notebook closed beneath my folded hands. Anything happen while I was gone? He asked. I looked at my husband of 41 years. The man who still needed my signature. The man who did not yet know I had found the folder. The man Vanessa thought she had already taken from me. No, I said calmly, nothing important. And for the first time in a long time, I was the one lying. Richard ate lunch as if we were still husband and wife. That was the part that unsettled me most. Not the lying, I had already accepted that. Not the smell of unfamiliar cologne on his shirt. Not the careful way he kept his phone angled away from me. Not even the folder hidden beneath his sweaters with my name typed on documents I had never seen. It was the normalness. He stood at the kitchen counter making a turkey sandwich, spreading mustard on wheat bread, asking if we still had pickles in the refrigerator. As if he had not spent the morning wherever he had truly been. As if Vanessa had not whispered poison into my ear at our son's dining table. As if 41 years could sit quietly in the same room with betrayal and pretend not to notice. Did you want one? He asked, holding up the bread. No, Thank you. You barely ate last night. I wasn't hungry. He looked at me for a second too long. Then he turned back to the counter. You've seemed off since dinner. There it was. The small test. Not concern. Measurement. I folded my hands around my coffee mug. I suppose I was tired. Vanessa went to a lot of trouble. I know she did. He waited. Maybe he expected me to say more. Maybe he wanted to hear whether I would mention the whisper. Maybe he needed to know if his secret had already begun to leak into the room. But I had learned something during all my years as a mother. The person who speaks first often gives away more than the person who stays quiet. So I said nothing. Richard took his plate to the table and sat across from me. The same seat he had taken thousands of times. The same seat where he used to read the Sunday paper while Daniel built towers from cereal boxes on the floor. Now he sat there chewing slowly, pretending the air between us was not full of broken glass. Daniel seemed happy, he said. He did. It was a good night for him. Yes. I'd hate for anything to ruin that. I looked up. There was no threat in his tone. That made it worse. A threat at least has the decency to show its teeth. This was softer, smoother, a sentence dressed like fatherly concern. I would hate that too, I said. His eyes moved over my face, searching. I let him search. All he saw was a woman in a navy cardigan, sitting at her kitchen table, looking smaller than she used to. That was the version of me Richard understood. The wife who kept the peace. The mother who swallowed pain so everyone else could finish dinner. He did not know that version of me had begun packing her things quietly inside my chest. Not clothes. Not memories. Fear. I was putting fear away, one piece at a time. After lunch, Richard went upstairs to make phone calls. He said they were business calls. I did not ask. Instead, I cleared his plate, rinsed the knife, wiped the crumbs from the counter, and watched my own hands move through the habits of a life that no longer existed. Then I went to the hall closet and took out the old blue accordion folder where I kept important papers. Birth certificates. Insurance policies. Tax returns. The deed to the house. I carried it to the dining room and spread everything across the table. The same dining room where we hosted Thanksgiving for 28 years. The same table where Vanessa once sat beside Daniel, newly engaged, smiling at me like a polite stranger. Back then, I had wanted so badly to love her. I remember taking her aside after dessert that first Thanksgiving. I know joining a new family can be overwhelming, I told her, but I want you to feel welcome here. She had smiled and said, "That's sweet." Not thank you. Not I do. Just that's sweet. I should have heard the distance then. But mothers of sons learn to lower their expectations. We tell ourselves not to crowd, not to judge, not to become the difficult mother-in-law everyone jokes about. So we accept crumbs and call them respect. I opened the deed first. My name was there. Margaret Ann Ellis. Richard's name beside mine. Joint ownership. Then I found the addendum Howard had mentioned. It was tucked behind the original closing papers, yellowed slightly at the edges. My father's signature was on one page as witness to the inheritance transfer. Seeing his handwriting made my throat tighten. Harold Whitaker. Strong, square letters. My father had been gone 15 years, but that signature felt like his hand on my shoulder. I read the clause slowly. Funds derived from Margaret Ann Ellis's separate inheritance shall retain protected reimbursement status in the event of sale, transfer, refinance, dissolution, or contested ownership. I did not understand every legal phrase, but I understood enough. My father had left me one last shield. I placed that document in a separate pile. Then I found the company records, early incorporation papers, bank letters, a capital contribution agreement from the year Richard expanded his business. My inheritance had helped secure the equipment loans. My inheritance had kept payroll running during a bad winter when 3 clients delayed payment. I remembered that winter. Richard came home one night and sat in the dark living room without taking off his coat. "We might lose it," he said. I sat beside him and asked, "How much do you need?" He cried then. Quietly, once. The only time I had ever seen him cry about money. I called my father the next morning. Dad did not ask many questions. He came over with a folder, a check, and Howard Bennett's business card. "Do it properly," he told us. "Love doesn't mean being careless." Richard had hugged me that night. He held me so tightly I could barely breathe. "I'll never forget this," he said. But he had. Or maybe he remembered perfectly and simply hoped I would not. By 3 o'clock, I had 2 neat stacks on the dining table. One stack, documents I needed to take to Howard. The other, papers Richard would expect to remain in the house. I photographed everything, every page, every signature, every date. Then I placed the originals back where they belonged. Carefully. Always carefully. Upstairs, Richard's voice rose once behind the closed bedroom door. I froze in the hallway. Not loud enough to hear every word, but enough to catch the shape of anger. "No, not now," he said. A pause. "I told you she doesn't know." My body went still. Another pause. Then his voice lowered, sharper. "Vanessa, listen to me." There it was. Her name in my bedroom. My husband standing near our bed, speaking to my son's wife as if she had the right to be in the most private corners of my life. I stepped back from the hallway. One step. Then another. Not because I was afraid of being caught. Because if I stayed there another second, I might open the door. And I could not open the door. Not yet. Downstairs, I returned to the dining room and sat with my hands flat on the table until the urge passed. That is something people do not understand about restraint. It is not weakness. It takes more strength to stay seated when your whole body wants to rise. A few minutes later, Richard came downstairs. His face was composed, but not fully. There was a tightness around his mouth. "Everything okay?" I asked. He looked startled. "Yes, why? You sounded upset." "Supplier issue." "Of course. Floors in the morning, suppliers in the afternoon. So many imaginary problems keeping my husband busy." I nodded. He glanced at the dining table, now empty. "What were you doing?" "Sorting old papers." His eyes narrowed. "What papers?" "Insurance, warranties, things we should probably organize before tax season." Tax season was the perfect lie. Boring enough to discourage questions. Normal enough to seem harmless. Richard relaxed slightly. "Don't wear yourself out with that." "I won't." He walked into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator again. I watched him from the doorway. This man had once known every one of my fears. Now he did not even know when I had stopped being afraid of him. That evening, Daniel called. I almost did not answer. But then I saw his name, and my heart softened in spite of everything. "Hi, honey." "Hey, Mom, just checking on you." His voice was casual, but there was something under it. "Checking on me? Vanessa said you seemed strange last night." Of course she had. I sat down on the edge of the sofa. "Strange how?" "I don't know. Quiet, I guess." I looked toward the stairs. Richard had gone back up again. I was tired. "That's what Emily said." My breath paused. So Vanessa had asked Emily. Then Daniel, maybe Richard. She was circling. "Your dinner was lovely," I said. "Vanessa will be glad to hear that." I closed my eyes briefly. Daniel sounded so proud of his life. So unaware. "Mom?" "Yes?" "You would tell me if something was wrong, right?" The question nearly broke me. There it was, the door opening by 1 inch. I could have walked through it. I could have said, "Yes, sweetheart, something is very wrong. Your wife and your father are hiding something ugly. And I have begun to prove it." But I saw his face in my mind. At 10 years old, bringing me dandelions from the yard. At 17, crying in the garage after his first heartbreak. At 32, standing at the altar, looking at Vanessa like she was the answer to every lonely moment he had ever known. Not over the phone. Not like this. Yes, I said softly. I would tell you. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, okay. After we hung up, I sat in the dim living room with the phone in my lap. Outside, the rain had started again. Soft, steady. Like the house was whispering to itself. Richard came downstairs around 7 and asked if I wanted to watch television. No, I said. I think I'll turn in early. You've been tired a lot lately. I looked at him. Have I? He blinked, perhaps hearing something in my voice he could not name. Then he gave a small shrug. Just noticing. Noticing. At last. I went upstairs, changed into my nightgown, and waited until Richard was in the shower. Then I took the flash drive Emily had given me, the photos of the hidden folder, and copies of the property documents, and placed them in a sealed envelope. I wrote one name across the front. Howard Bennett. Then I slid it into my purse. Not hidden too deeply. Not carelessly placed. Just where I could reach it. The next morning, I would go to Howard's office through the side entrance. I would sit across from the man who knew the legal bones of my marriage. And I would begin asking the questions I should have asked years ago. Before turning off the lamp, I looked at Richard's side of the bed. Empty. The shower was still running. For 41 years, I had believed marriage meant facing the world together. Now I understood something colder. Sometimes the person beside you becomes the world you have to face. I turned off the light. And in the darkness, I did not feel alone. I felt awake. I left the house at 7:55 the next morning. Richard was still upstairs, pretending to be asleep. I knew he was awake. After 41 years, I could tell the difference between sleep and performance. Real sleep has weight. It softens a person. Richard's silence that morning was too careful, too aware. I dressed plainly. Black slacks, cream blouse, gray coat. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would make him ask where I was going. In the kitchen, I wrote a note and left it beside the coffee maker. Running errands. Back later. 3 words would have been enough. But I added the last 2 because that was what the old Margaret would have written. Back later. As if I were still accountable for every hour of my own day. I stood there for a moment, looking at the note. Then I picked up my purse, felt the sealed envelope inside, and walked out through the garage. The air was cold enough to sting my cheeks. Early spring in Illinois has a way of pretending winter is over. Then reminding you not to trust too quickly. The sky was pale, and the streets were still wet from last night's rain. I drove carefully. Not because I was calm. Because I needed to arrive calm. Howard Bennett's office was in an old brick building near downtown Naperville. The kind with brass door handles and flower boxes that would be full by May. I had been there many times over the years. To sign tax papers, to update wills, to review business documents. Always with Richard. That morning, I used the side entrance. Howard was waiting for me himself. He had aged since I last saw him. His hair had gone almost entirely white. And he used reading glasses now. But his eyes were the same. Sharp, kind, patient. Margaret, he said. I had planned to greet him politely. Instead, when he opened the door, I nearly cried. Not because I felt weak. Because for the first time since Vanessa whispered in my ear, I was standing in front of someone who did not need me to pretend. Howard did not hug me. He was too professional for that. But he placed one hand lightly on my shoulder and said, "Come in." His office smelled like paper, coffee, and old wood. I sat across from his desk and placed the envelope in front of him. "These are copies," I said. "Photos, documents, dates. My granddaughter helped me save some of it." He looked at the envelope. Then back at me. "Does Richard know you're here?" "No." "Good." It was a small word. It told me enough. Howard opened the envelope and began reading. I watched his face. Lawyers are trained not to show too much. But they are still human. At first, his expression stayed neutral. Then his mouth tightened. Then he removed his glasses, cleaned them slowly, and put them back on. That frightened me more than if he had cursed. He picked up the property valuation first. Where did you find this? In Richard's dresser. Under sweaters. Was it signed? No. Did you move the originals? No. I photographed everything and put it back exactly as it was. For the first time that morning, Howard looked almost pleased. Good. Then he studied the draft loan agreement. This is serious. My hands were folded in my lap. How serious? It appears Richard may be preparing to use the house or company-connected assets to secure a private loan through this LLC. Can he do that? Not cleanly, not with your name and protected interest attached. But people sometimes try to pressure a spouse into signing quickly. They present it as routine, tax-related, business-related, temporary. Temporary. That word had ruined more women than hatred ever could. Temporary help. Temporary loan. Temporary separation. Temporary sacrifice. Women sign away years of protection because someone they love tells them it will only be temporary. Howard continued, your father's inheritance clause matters. It does not make everything simple. But it gives you leverage. Strong leverage. I looked toward the window behind him. Outside, people walked past holding coffee cups. Carrying bags. Living ordinary Monday mornings. Inside that office, my life was being sorted into assets. Clauses. Signatures. Exposure. What about the company? I asked. Howard looked down again. Richard has more freedom there, depending on how the operating accounts are structured. But if marital funds or your protected funds were moved into an entity connected to Vanessa, that raises questions. He listed her as a secondary contact. I saw that. What does that mean? It means she is more involved than she should be. I let out a slow breath. There it was. A professional sentence for something ugly. Howard leaned back in his chair. Margaret, I need to ask something directly. All right. Did Richard threaten you? No. Did Vanessa? I thought about the porch light on her face. You should start preparing yourself. Richard wants a new life. No, I said, not in a way she would admit. Howard nodded as if that answer made perfect sense. She wants me unsettled, I said. She wants me to react. Then don't. I don't plan to. He placed the papers down and folded his hands on the desk. I'm going to advise you to do several things. First, open a separate bank account in your name only if you don't already have one. Second, do not sign anything Richard gives you. Third, make copies of every financial record you can access legally. Fourth, we review your estate documents immediately. My will? Your will, power of attorney, medical directives, beneficiaries. I felt my stomach tighten again. Beneficiaries. Yes. I had not thought that far. Maybe because thinking that far meant admitting how deep this could go. A marriage can end in many ways. Some quiet, some brutal, some dressed in legal language before the wife even knows there is a war. Could Richard change things without me? I asked. Some things, yes. Others, no. That's why we check now. Now. Not later. Not after one more excuse. Now. Howard opened a drawer and took out a legal pad. I'll start a file, quietly. I won't contact Richard unless you authorize it. Thank you. And Margaret? I looked at him. Do not underestimate Vanessa. The name sounded different in his office. Not daughter-in-law. Not hostess. Not mother of my grandchildren. Vanessa. A woman with motive. A woman attached to my husband, my son, and now possibly my property. I won't, I said. He studied me for a moment. No, he said quietly. I don't think you will. When I left Howard's office, I did not go home right away. I drove to a small diner 3 blocks away and parked near the back. Richard and I used to go there years ago after church when Daniel was little. He would order pancakes with chocolate chips, and Richard would pretend to steal them until Daniel squealed with laughter. I sat in the parking lot and watched people come and go. A young mother carrying a baby carrier. An older couple walking slowly, holding hands. A man in a work jacket drinking coffee from a paper cup. Life kept moving. That was one of the cruelest lessons of heartbreak. Your world can split open, and someone nearby is still deciding whether to order fries. My phone buzzed. Richard. Where are you? I looked at the message for a long moment. Not. Hope errands are going okay. Not. Need anything? Where are you? Ownership disguised as concern. I typed back. Still out. I'll be home soon. His reply came quickly. What errands? There it was again. The measuring. I did not answer immediately. Instead, I opened my banking app. Howard had told me to open a separate account. I could not do that from the diner parking lot completely, but I could make an appointment. I selected the branch on Ogden Avenue and chose the earliest available time that afternoon. Then I replied to Richard. Pharmacy, bank, groceries, ordinary things. I almost smiled at that. Ordinary things. A pharmacy where old women pick up medication. A bank where old women ask questions their husbands hope they never ask. A grocery store where old women buy milk, bread, and the courage to keep going. Richard did not respond. I drove to the bank. The young woman who helped me could not have been more than 28. Her name tag said Claire. She wore a navy blazer and had a kind face. I'd like to open an account in my name only, I said. Of course. She asked routine questions: address, identification, contact number, initial deposit. I answered each one. Simple questions. Powerful answers. When she asked if I wanted anyone else authorized on the account, I looked straight at her. No. She clicked a box. Just like that, a small door opened in my life. My name. My access. My account. Afterward, I stopped at the grocery store because I had told Richard the first would. I bought milk, eggs, bread, coffee, and a bag of apples I did not need. Proof of an ordinary errand. Women who have lived long enough know that sometimes survival includes buying apples. When I pulled into the driveway, Richard's truck was already there. He was waiting in the kitchen. Not sitting. Standing. Where have you been? He asked. I set the grocery bags on the counter. I told you. You were gone for hours. The bank took longer than expected. His eyes sharpened. The bank? Yes. What did you need at the bank? I took the milk from the bag and placed it in the refrigerator. Nothing unusual. Margaret. There was warning in his voice now. Not loud. Not yet. I closed the refrigerator door and turned to face him. For a moment, I saw the man I had loved. The gray at his temples. The familiar line of his shoulders. The face that had once meant home. Then I saw the folder under the sweaters. The phone call with Vanessa. The loan papers with my name typed where my consent was required. I picked up groceries, I said. I went to the pharmacy. I handled something at the bank. What something? I looked at him calmly. My own business. The words were not loud. But they changed the temperature of the room. Richard stared at me. I could almost see him trying to find the old script. The one where he questioned. And I explained. The one where he frowned. And I softened. The one where his discomfort became my responsibility. But I did not step into that role. Not this time. His phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at it. Too fast. I saw the name before he turned the screen over. Vanessa. For 1 second, neither of us moved. Then I picked up the bag of apples and placed them in the fruit bowl. One by one. Red apples against white ceramic. A quiet sound. A steady hand. Richard cleared his throat. I need to take this. I'm sure you do. He looked at me again. But this time there was something new in his eyes. Not guilt. Not regret. Fear. Small, but real. He took the phone and walked out of the kitchen. I stood there alone, arranging apples in a bowl as if my life were not changing shape around me. Then I smiled. Not because I was happy. Because Vanessa had called at exactly the wrong moment. And now Richard knew one thing for certain. I had seen her name. Richard took Vanessa's call in the garage. He thought the closed door was enough. It was not. Old houses carry sound in strange ways. Through vents, under doors, along pipes. After 32 years in that house, I knew where a whisper could travel and where a shout disappeared. I did not press my ear to the door. I did not need to. I stood at the sink, rinsing the apples one by one, and listened to the low murmur of my husband's voice as it rose and fell behind the wall. "No," he said once, sharp enough for me to hear. Then quieter words. Then my name. Margaret. There are few things colder than hearing your own name spoken in a conversation you are not meant to hear. I turned off the faucet. The house went quiet except for Richard's voice in the garage and the ticking clock above the stove. "I don't know," he said. "She went to the bank." A pause. I said, "I don't know." Another pause. Then, lower, angry. "You shouldn't have said anything to her at dinner." I closed my eyes. So he knew. He knew Vanessa had whispered to me. Maybe not the exact words. Maybe she had told him some polished version of it. Maybe she claimed I provoked her. Maybe she laughed it off as pressure. Hormones. Nerves. But he knew something had happened. And he had come home asking where I had been, not what she had done. That told me everything. I dried the last apple and placed it in the bowl. One red apple had a bruise near the stem. I turned it so the mark faced down. For years, that had been my specialty. Turning the bruised side away. Making things look fine. Richard came back inside 10 minutes later. His face was controlled, but not relaxed. He placed his phone in his pocket instead of on the counter. That was new. "Everything okay?" I asked. He looked at me. "Yes." "Supplier again?" His jaw tightened slightly. "No, Daniel." My son's name sounded wrong in his mouth at that moment. Not because Daniel had called. Because Daniel had not. Richard was using him as cover. I nodded. "How is he?" "Fine." "Good." We stood in the kitchen like two actors who had forgotten which scene came next. Finally, Richard said, "Vanessa thinks you may have misunderstood something last night." There it was. Not an accusation. Not yet. A test wrapped in concern. I picked up the dish towel and folded it once. Then again. "What does she think I misunderstood?" He shifted his weight. "She said you seemed upset after she joked with you." "Joked?" "Yes." "What was the joke?" He looked away. A husband who cannot repeat the joke already knows it was not one. "She didn't say exactly." "How strange." "Margaret." I placed the folded towel beside the sink. "She whispered something to me at the table," I said calmly. Then again on the porch. His face changed. Only slightly. But I had spent 4 decades reading that face across dinner tables. Hospital rooms, church pews, and tax appointments. I knew guilt when it tried to pass as confusion. "What did she say?" I looked at him for a long moment. This was the fork in the road. I could say it. I could put the sentence into the room and watch him scramble to deny. Explain. Or blame. But Howard's voice was still in my mind. "Do not accuse anyone tonight." People who think they've gotten away with something often become careless if they believe no one is watching. So I gave Richard only half a door. "You should ask her," I said. His eyes narrowed. "I'm asking you. And I'm telling you that if it was only a joke, she should have no trouble repeating it." Silence. The kind that makes furniture seem louder. Richard rubbed one hand over his mouth. "You've been under stress." There it was. I almost felt sorry for him. Not because he deserved pity, but because the line was so predictable, so small. The easiest way to dismiss an older woman is to make her emotions the problem. "Yes," I said, "I have." He seemed relieved for half a second. Then I added, "But stress hasn't affected my hearing." His relief vanished. The phone in his pocket buzzed again. He did not reach for it. I looked at the pocket. Then back at him. "Are you going to answer Daniel?" A flush crept up his neck. "It can wait." Of course it could. Vanessa could wait. For now. That evening, Richard stayed home. That alone told me he was worried. Usually, when he wanted distance, He invented errands, hardware store, job site, client meeting, fuel receipt, anything. But that night, he sat in the living room with the television on and his attention fixed nowhere near the screen. I made dinner because I needed the routine. Chicken soup, toast, sliced apples. Simple food. Food for people recovering from illness. Maybe that was fitting. We ate mostly in silence. Richard tried once to ask about my bank errand again, but I looked at him so directly that he let the question die before finishing it. After dinner, I washed the dishes. He dried them. That used to be one of our small rituals. I would wash. He would dry. Daniel would run in and out of the kitchen talking too fast about school or baseball or some little injustice that felt enormous to him at the time. Now Richard stood beside me holding a towel, and I felt no comfort in his nearness. Only awareness. His elbow close to mine. His phone in his pocket. His secret standing between us like a third person. When we finished, I went upstairs before him. I did not sleep. I waited. At 11:42, Richard's side of the bed shifted. He eased himself up carefully, the way a man moves when he does not want to wake his wife. I kept my breathing slow. He stood beside the bed for almost a minute, watching me. I felt it. Then he walked quietly out of the room. A few seconds later, the hallway floor creaked, then the stairs. I waited until the house settled again, then got up and slipped on my robe. The hallway was dark. A thin line of light showed beneath the study door downstairs. I did not follow him all the way. I stopped at the landing, where shadows covered me and sound rose clearly from below. Richard was speaking softly. "She's different," he said. A pause. "I know what you said." Another pause. "No, don't come here." My hand tightened on the railing. Then he said something that made the last softness in me harden. "We just need her signature. After that, she can't do much." There it was. Not suspicion. Not fear. Confirmation. I stood in the darkness, perfectly still. Her signature. My signature. The one thing between them and whatever they had planned. Vanessa said something on the other end. I could not hear it, but Richard's reply came through clearly. "Daniel won't believe her, not without proof." I almost smiled. Not because it was funny. Because he was already wrong. I had proof. Not enough for Daniel's heart. Maybe, not yet. But enough for the first stone in the wall. Richard lowered his voice further, and I lost the rest. I went back to bed before he came upstairs. This time, I did not tremble. I lay down, faced the window, and watched the dark outline of the maple tree move lightly in the wind. When Richard returned 15 minutes later, he paused again beside the bed. I kept my eyes closed. He got under the covers. His breathing took a long time to settle. Mine did not. The next morning, I woke before sunrise and wrote everything down. 11:42 p.m. Study. Call with Vanessa. She's different. We just need her signature. Daniel won't believe her, not without proof. I underlined the last word. Proof. Then I sent Howard a short message from my private email account. "They are waiting for my signature. Richard said Daniel won't believe me without proof. I heard him last night." Howard replied 20 minutes later. "Do not confront. We move carefully. Bring any new documentation. Also check whether Richard has scheduled any meeting requiring your signature." I stared at that sentence. Any meeting. My phone buzzed. This time, it was Daniel. "Mom, Dad said you and Vanessa had some kind of misunderstanding. Can we all have dinner this week and clear the air?" I read the message twice. Then a third time. There it was. The next step. They wanted another dinner. Another table. Another performance. Another chance to make me look confused in front of my son. I sat at the kitchen table, the morning light slowly filling the room around me. For most of my life, I had feared confrontation. I thought peace meant preventing discomfort. I thought dignity meant absorbing pain quietly so others would not have to feel awkward. But Vanessa had chosen the dinner table as her stage. Richard had chosen silence as his shield. And Daniel, poor Daniel, had been placed in the center without knowing there was a knife under the napkin. I typed back slowly. Yes, sweetheart, dinner would be good. Let's do it here. Thursday evening. I'll cook. His reply came quickly. Thanks, Mom. Love you. I looked at those two words. Love you. For his sake, I hoped he still meant them after Thursday. Then I opened my notebook to a clean page and wrote. Thursday dinner. Guest list. Daniel. Vanessa. Richard. Emily if willing. Howard? Maybe not present, but ready. I paused. Then I added one more line. Envelopes. I did not yet know exactly what would go inside them. But I knew where they would sit. One at each place. Neatly arranged. Just like Vanessa's place cards. Only this time, I would be the one deciding what everyone saw when they sat down. Thursday arrived quietly. That felt wrong at first. I thought a day like that should announce itself somehow. A crack of thunder, a storm, a phone call before dawn. Something dramatic enough to match the weight sitting in my chest. But the morning looked ordinary. Pale sunlight through the kitchen window. Coffee dripping into the pot. The newspaper lying damp at the end of the driveway. A robin hopping across the grass as if the world had not changed at all. I stood at the sink, looking out at the backyard. The tulips had started to open. Red ones first. Richard used to plant them with me every fall. He dug the holes because my knees bothered me, and I placed the bulbs in carefully, point facing up. He always joked that if marriage had instructions, I would read them twice and correct the grammar. I smiled at those memories once. Now they felt like old letters from someone who had died. Richard came downstairs just after 7. He moved carefully around me, the way people do when they know a room contains a secret but do not know where it has been placed. Dinner still happening tonight? He asked. Yes. You sure that's a good idea? I poured coffee into my mug. Daniel wants to clear the air. Richard's mouth tightened. That's not exactly what I meant. I know. He looked at me, waiting. I took one sip of coffee. Vanessa will be here, won't she? Yes, he said. His answer came too quickly. As if he had already confirmed it. As if he and Vanessa had discussed the plan long before I invited them. Good, I said. He frowned slightly. Good? I wouldn't want her to feel excluded. For a second, I saw it, a flicker of unease crossing his face before he covered it. Richard had known me for most of my adult life, but he did not know this version of me. That was becoming useful. After breakfast, he left for work. Or said he did. I did not ask where he was going. I no longer needed every lie named out loud. Some lies were more helpful when allowed to continue. The moment his truck left the driveway, I began preparing. Not the food. The truth. On the dining room table, I laid out 5 cream-colored envelopes. One for Richard. One for Vanessa. One for Daniel. One for Emily. One for me. I had bought them the day before at a small stationery store near the bank. The clerk told me they were usually used for wedding invitations. That almost made me laugh. Weddings and family scandals apparently required the same paper. I wrote each name by hand. Slowly. Carefully. Richard. Vanessa. Daniel. Emily. Margaret. My handwriting looked steadier than I felt. Inside Richard's envelope, I placed copies of the property valuation, the draft loan agreement, and a page from the LLC paperwork showing Vanessa's contact information. Not everything. Just enough. Men like Richard did not need to be buried under evidence immediately. They needed to see the first shovel. Inside Vanessa's envelope, I placed one photo. The January picture Emily had taken downtown. Richard's hand on her waist. I chose that photo because it could not be explained as a conversation. It could not be softened into a misunderstanding. It had the quiet intimacy of people who had forgotten the world could still see them. I added one line on a small card. You should have checked who was watching. I looked at that sentence for a long time before sliding it in. Not cruel. Not loud. Accurate. Inside Daniel's envelope, I placed nothing at first. That was the hardest one. I sat there for nearly 20 minutes, staring at the empty cream paper with my son's name written across the front. What does a mother place in an envelope meant to break her child's heart? A photograph? A bank record? A sentence? An apology? I closed my eyes and saw Daniel at 8 years old, standing in the backyard with grass stains on his jeans, holding a baseball glove too big for his hand. "Mom, watch me," he used to call. I always watched. That was the trouble with being a mother. You see the child inside the man even when the man is old enough to face the truth. Finally, I placed 2 items in his envelope. The same January photo. And a short note. "Daniel, I am sorry this is how you have to see it. I waited until I had proof because I knew your heart would try to protect the wrong person. I love you, Mom." I read it 3 times. Then I sealed the envelope before I could change my mind. Emily's envelope contained no evidence. Only a note. "You did the right thing. None of this is your fault." Mine contained a list. "Not for the others. For me. Do not raise your voice. Do not defend yourself too early. Let them speak. Watch who lies first. Protect Daniel. Do not sign anything. Call Howard after dinner." I folded the list and placed it inside. Then I set the envelopes aside and began cooking. Because life is strange that way. A woman can prepare evidence at 10 in the morning and peel potatoes at 10:30. I made pot roast, carrots, mashed potatoes, green beans, and apple pie. Simple food. Family food. The kind of meal that once meant comfort in that house. As the roast cooked, the smell filled every room. Onion, garlic, beef, rosemary. It reminded me of Sundays when Daniel was young and Richard came home from job sites covered in dust, kissing me on the cheek before washing his hands. Memory is unfair. It does not ask whether the person deserves to be remembered kindly. It simply arrives. By 3 o'clock, Emily texted me, "Are you sure you want me there?" I wiped my hands on a towel and replied, "Only if you feel able. You do not have to speak." Her answer came after a minute. "I'll come. I don't want you alone." That one sentence nearly broke the careful wall I had built inside myself. I put the phone down and pressed both hands against the counter. For years, I had believed I was supposed to protect everyone else. I had not expected my granddaughter to try to protect me. At 5:30, Richard came home. He stepped into the kitchen, stopped, and looked at the table. The dining room was set. White tablecloth, good china, low candles, silverware aligned properly, water glasses polished until they caught the light. And at each place, a cream envelope. His eyes went to them immediately. "What are those?" "Place cards," I said. He looked at me. "They look like envelopes." "They are." His face tightened. "Margaret." I opened the oven and checked the roast. "Yes? What are you doing?" I closed the oven door and turned toward him. "Hosting dinner." He stared at me for a long moment. Then his phone buzzed. He did not look at it. He did not need to. We both knew who it was. "Maybe we should cancel," he said. "No. She's pregnant," he said suddenly. There it was. Not concern for Daniel. Not shame. A weapon placed on the counter. I looked at him. "Is she?" His face changed. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means exactly what I said." For the first time, Richard looked truly unsettled. Good. Let him feel a small piece of what he had handed me. The doorbell rang at 6. Richard flinched. I walked past him and opened the door. Daniel stood there holding flowers. Grocery store tulips, still wrapped in plastic. Behind him stood Vanessa in a burgundy dress, one hand resting lightly against her stomach. The gesture was deliberate. Too deliberate. Lily and Mason were not with them. Neither was Emily yet. "Mom," Daniel said, kissing my cheek, "these are for you." "Thank you, honey." Vanessa smiled. "Margaret, the house smells wonderful." "Thank you." Her eyes moved past me into the dining room. She saw the envelopes. Her smile did not disappear. But it changed. A polished surface cracking at one corner. "What a formal setup," she said. "I thought tonight deserved care." Daniel looked between us. "I hope this doesn't have to be uncomfortable." I touched his arm. "We'll eat first." Vanessa laughed lightly. "That sounds ominous." I met her eyes. "Does it?" She looked away first. Small victory. But I did not enjoy it. There is no real joy in watching poison begin to recognize the antidote. Emily arrived 10 minutes later. She came alone, wearing jeans and a dark sweater. She hugged me tightly at the door and whispered, "I'm here." "I know," I whispered back. When she stepped into the dining room, Vanessa's expression sharpened. "Emily," she said, "I didn't know you were coming." Emily looked at her mother. "I'm family." The room went quiet. Daniel gave a nervous little laugh. "Well, of course you are." We sat down. Richard at one end of the table. Daniel at the other. Vanessa on Daniel's right. Emily beside me. I had arranged myself directly across from Vanessa. Not by accident. The envelopes remained beside each plate, unopened. Daniel kept glancing at his. "What are these, Mom?" Later. "Should I be worried?" I looked at my son. "Yes," I said gently, "but not because of me." Vanessa set down her fork. "Margaret, if this is about Saturday, I already told Daniel you misunderstood a private joke." Richard stared at his plate. Emily went still beside me. Daniel frowned. "What joke?" Vanessa waved one hand lightly. "Nothing worth repeating." I placed my napkin in my lap. "Then don't worry, I won't repeat it yet." The word yet landed exactly where I wanted it to. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. The meal began. For 20 minutes, we performed family. Daniel talked too much because silence made him nervous. Richard barely ate. Emily kept her hands in her lap. Vanessa praised the roast twice and did not touch the wine. I watched them all. The liar. The accomplice. The son. The witness. And me. The woman they had expected to fold. When dessert was finished, I stood and began clearing plates. Daniel reached for his envelope. "Mom, can we please talk about whatever this is?" "Yes," I said. I carried the last dessert plate into the kitchen, rinsed it, and dried my hands. Then I returned to the dining room. No one spoke. The candles burned low between us. I sat down slowly and placed my hands on the table. "You may open them now," I said. Vanessa did not move. Richard did. His fingers went first. That told me who was more afraid. Daniel opened his envelope a second later. Emily did not open hers. She already knew. Vanessa waited until last, smiling as if this were ridiculous. Then she slid one finger under the flap and pulled out the photograph. Her face went pale. Not white. Not dramatic. Just drained enough for everyone to notice. Daniel looked down at his own photo. Then up at his wife. Then at his father. No one moved. No one breathed. The family dinner had finally become honest. Daniel did not speak at first. He only stared at the photograph in his hand. I watched his face change in small, painful stages. Confusion first, then disbelief, then the terrible effort of a man trying to make a picture mean something else. Anything else? His eyes moved from the photo to Vanessa. Then to Richard. Then back to the photo again. "What is this?" he asked. His voice was quiet. That made it worse. Vanessa recovered first. Of course she did. People like Vanessa always have a second face ready. She gave a small laugh, thin and polished, and placed her photograph on the table as if it were nothing more than a grocery receipt. "Daniel, don't let her do this." I did not answer. Daniel looked at her. "Do what?" Vanessa leaned toward him, her hand moving toward his arm. He did not pull away, but he did not lean into her either. "This is exactly what I was worried about," she said. "Your mother has been acting strange since Saturday. She's upset, and now she's trying to turn something innocent into something ugly." Richard set his envelope down. His face had gone gray. Not pale, gray. An old color, a guilty color. Daniel turned to him. Dad? Richard opened his mouth. Nothing came out. That silence was the first honest thing he had given me in months. Vanessa saw it too. Her eyes flashed toward him, sharp as a warning. Richard was helping me, she said quickly. That's all. I was having some issues. And he was giving me advice. At a private office downtown? Daniel asked. His voice was still quiet. Vanessa blinked. For the first time, she had not expected the next question. It wasn't private, she said. It was just a meeting place. Emily shifted beside me. Daniel heard it. He looked at his daughter. Emily? My granddaughter's face tightened. I wanted to reach for her hand. But I did not. This was not my moment to take from her. She swallowed. I took the picture. Dad. The room changed. It was not loud. No one gasped. No one stood. But something moved through the dining room like cold air under a door. Daniel's hand lowered slowly to the table. You took this? Emily nodded. When? January. Why? Her eyes filled, but she held his gaze. Because it wasn't the first time I saw something that didn't make sense. Vanessa's mask slipped. Emily. One word. Not a mother's plea. A command. Emily flinched. That small flinch did more damage to Vanessa than the photograph. Daniel saw it. I saw him see it. He turned back to Vanessa. What else? Vanessa laughed again, but now the sound had edges. This is ridiculous. Are we really going to interrogate me at dinner because your mother and our teenage daughter have been spying on people? She's 19, I said. Everyone looked at me. My voice had been calm, almost soft. Emily is 19, I repeated, and she did not spy. She noticed. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. You've been filling her head. No, Emily said. Her voice surprised all of us. Even her. She sat up straighter. No, Grandma didn't even know until Sunday. I told her because I was scared. Because you kept asking me to lie without saying the word lie. Daniel looked at Emily as if he had never seen her before. What do you mean? Emily took a shaky breath. You told me not to mention certain things. Like when you were going out. Or when Grandpa came by. You said Dad was stressed and didn't need details. You said I was old enough to understand adult privacy. Daniel closed his eyes. The photograph was still under his hand. Richard finally spoke. Daniel, this has gotten out of control. My son opened his eyes and looked at him. Then control it. Richard blinked. Tell me what this is, Daniel said, right now. Richard looked at Vanessa. There it was. The glance. Quick, desperate, revealing. A guilty man checking with his partner before answering his son. Daniel saw that too. The boy I raised was still in there. But now the man was waking up. Vanessa placed one hand on her stomach. I don't think this stress is good for me. There it was. The shield. The announcement without saying the full sentence. Daniel's face twisted. What does that mean? Vanessa looked at me, then at him. I was going to tell you privately. Richard closed his eyes. Too late. Vanessa whispered, I'm pregnant. Silence. I looked at Daniel. Not Vanessa, not Richard. Daniel. That was where the real wound landed. He sat very still, staring at his wife. For one brief, painful second, I saw hope flicker across his face. Hope is cruel when it arrives in the middle of betrayal. It offers a man one last rope, even if the rope is burning. You're pregnant? He asked. Vanessa nodded, tears appearing exactly when needed. Yes. Daniel's voice broke slightly. Is it mine? The question should have shaken the walls. Instead, it fell softly onto the table. Vanessa's tears stopped too quickly. That is a horrible thing to ask me. Is it mine? Daniel. Answer me. Richard stood suddenly. Enough. His chair scraped the floor. For decades, Richard's raised voice had been enough to end a conversation in our house. Not because he was cruel back then, but because he was the father. The husband. The man everyone expected to steady the room. That power did not work anymore. Daniel rose too. No, he said. Not enough. Not even close. I had never heard my son speak to his father that way. Richard stared at him. Vanessa pushed back her chair. This is exactly what she wanted, she said, pointing at me now. She wanted to humiliate me. She's been jealous of me from the beginning. I almost smiled. There it was. The old story. The bitter mother-in-law. The aging woman jealous of youth. The easy lie people accept because it requires less thinking. But Daniel did not look at me. He kept looking at Vanessa. You whispered something to my mother at dinner Saturday, he said. Vanessa froze. What did you say? She looked at Richard. Again. Too fast. Daniel's jaw tightened. What did you say to her? It was nothing. What did you say? Vanessa's face hardened. I told her the truth. The words hung in the room. Richard whispered, Vanessa. But she was past caution now. Anger had taken over where strategy failed. She needed to hear it. Vanessa said, she sits there judging everyone. Acting like some saint. Richard has been miserable for years. My body went cold. Not because of the insult. Because Daniel heard it. All of it. Richard reached for the back of his chair as if he needed support. Daniel looked at his father. Miserable? Richard said nothing. Vanessa kept going. She doesn't see him. She doesn't appreciate him. She treats him like some old piece of furniture. I looked down at my hands. Old hands. Hands that had worked, cooked, cleaned, held children, signed checks, wiped tears, planted tulips, and carried this family through years Vanessa had never seen. When I looked up, Daniel was staring at Richard. Dad, he said, is this true? Richard rubbed his forehead. It's complicated. Those two words broke something in Daniel. Not loudly. Not visibly. But I saw it. Complicated is what guilty people call the truth when they do not want to name it. Daniel stepped back from the table. Emily had tears on her face now. But she was silent. Vanessa looked around the room and realized she had lost control of the story. So she reached for the one thing she thought no one would challenge. I am carrying a child, she said, and all of you are attacking me. No one answered. The old me might have softened. The old me might have said we should all calm down. That stress was bad, that we could talk later. But the old me had spent too many years protecting people from the consequences of their own choices. I reached for my envelope. The one with my name. I opened it and removed my folded list. Do not raise your voice. Do not defend yourself too early. Let them speak. Watch who lies first. Protect Daniel. Do not sign anything. Call Howard after dinner. I placed the list on the table in front of me. Then I looked at Vanessa. No one here is attacking a child, I said. We are asking adults to tell the truth. She laughed bitterly. You don't know anything. I know enough to call my attorney. Richard's head lifted. Vanessa's face changed. That was the first time I saw real fear in her eyes. Not anger. Not performance. Fear. Daniel looked at me. Attorney? I nodded. Howard Bennett. Richard sat down slowly. As if his legs had lost confidence. I turned to my son. Daniel, there are financial documents you need to see. Not tonight, not all at once, but soon. What financial documents? He asked. Vanessa stood. We're leaving. Daniel did not move. She stared at him. Daniel, now. He looked at her hand on her stomach. Then at the photograph. Then at Emily. Then at Richard. Finally, he said, I'm not going anywhere until someone tells me why my father's name is connected to your secret meetings and my mother's property. Vanessa went still. That was not a question I had fed him. That was Daniel thinking. Connecting. Waking up. Richard said, this is between your mother and me. No, Daniel said, you brought it into my marriage. The room fell silent again. I thought of all the family dinners I had hosted in that house. Birthdays, Thanksgivings, Graduations. Sunday meals after church. All those years, I believed truth lived in the big moments. I was wrong. Truth often arrives quietly. In a photograph. In a daughter's flinch. In a husband's glance. In a son finally asking the right question. Vanessa reached for her purse. If you believe them over me, then maybe I know where I stand. Daniel looked at her with eyes I barely recognized. So do I. She waited for him to apologize. He did not. That was when she understood. Not everything. But enough. She had counted on Daniel's love being blind. She had not counted on his pain giving him sight. Vanessa did not leave right away. She stood beside her chair with her purse in one hand, waiting for someone to stop her. That had always been part of her power. She understood hesitation. She knew how to create a silence just long enough for another person to fill it with apology. Daniel had done it for years. Richard had done it too. Even I had done it. In smaller ways. At holidays and birthdays and school events when her coldness made everyone uncomfortable. But that night, no one rescued her from the silence. Not Daniel. Not Richard. Not Emily. Not me. The candles on the table burned lower. One of them flickered in the draft from the hallway. The roast sat half-eaten on the serving platter. The cream envelopes lay open beside the plates like small doors that could not be closed again. Vanessa looked at Daniel. You're really going to let them do this to me? Daniel did not answer quickly. I could see the battle in his face. Love does not die all at once. Even when truth walks into the room and sits down at the table. Part of him still wanted to believe her. Part of him wanted this to be a misunderstanding. A cruel setup. A story we would all regret by morning. But another part of him had seen the photograph. He had seen Emily flinch. He had seen his father look at Vanessa before answering. Those things had weight. Sit down, Daniel said finally. Vanessa blinked. What? Sit down. His voice was not loud. That was what made it different. He was not begging. He was not shouting. He was no longer trying to calm the room so everyone else could feel better. He was asking for the truth. Vanessa laughed once. A small, offended sound. I'm pregnant, Daniel. I'm upset. I don't need this. If you're pregnant, he said, then we need to talk about that too. The word if struck the table harder than any accusation. Vanessa's eyes sharpened. If? Daniel looked at her hand still resting on her stomach. Yes, he said, if. Richard stood again. Daniel, be careful. My son turned to him. With what? My marriage? My wife? My father? Because apparently everybody else stopped being careful a long time ago. Richard's face tightened. I had never seen Daniel look at him that way. Not as a son looking at a father. As a man looking at another man who had broken something sacred. Vanessa pulled out her chair and sat. But only barely. She perched on the edge as if she did not intend to stay. Her eyes moved from Richard to me. Then to the envelopes again. What exactly do you think you have? She asked me. Not Daniel. Me. That was her second mistake of the evening. The first was thinking the photograph would be easy to explain. The second was reminding everyone that I was the one she feared. I folded my hands on the table. Enough to ask questions. You have one picture. One picture in your envelope. Her mouth closed. Daniel looked at me. There's more? I hated the way his voice sounded. Young. Lost. Like the boy who used to come into my bedroom after nightmares and ask if monsters were real. Yes, I said gently, there's more. Vanessa shook her head. This is insane. Emily spoke before I could. No, Mom, what's insane is asking me to lie to Dad without ever saying the word lie. Vanessa turned on her. I never asked you to lie. You told me not to mention seeing Grandpa's truck. Because you were being nosy. You told me Dad was too stressed to hear every little thing. That's called protecting your family. Emily's voice trembled, but she did not look away. No, that's called using me. Daniel's face changed again. The pain deepened, but so did something else. Recognition. He was beginning to understand that the affair. if that was what we could call it, was only one layer. Underneath it were months of small instructions, withheld details, manipulated loyalties, and carefully managed appearances. Vanessa had not only betrayed him, she had recruited his daughter into the shadow of it. Richard rubbed his forehead. Emily, your mother made mistakes, but this doesn't need to become. Don't, Daniel said. Richard looked at him. Don't call this mistakes. The room fell quiet. For once, Richard had no fatherly sentence ready. Daniel picked up his envelope again and pulled out my note. I watched his eyes move across the words. I am sorry, this is how you have to see it. I waited until I had proof because I knew your heart would try to protect the wrong person. I love you, Mom. His jaw tightened. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. I had prepared myself for his anger, his denial, even his accusation that I had gone too far. I had not prepared myself for his grief. Mom, he said quietly. That one word almost broke me. I know, I said. And I did. I knew the awful feeling of sitting in a room with people you loved and realizing they had been living another life beside you. I knew how the mind searches backward, grabbing at memories, trying to sort real moments from staged ones. Was that dinner real? That trip? That anniversary? That apology? That smile? Betrayal does not only wound the present, it travels backward and stains the past. Daniel looked at Richard. How long? Richard's hand tightened around the back of his chair. It isn't what you think. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Every guilty person in America says that. For a moment, I almost saw the boy he had been. Direct, honest, tired of excuses. Then the man returned. How long? He repeated. Vanessa answered first. That doesn't matter. Daniel's head turned slowly toward her. It matters to me. She leaned back, her face hardening. Fine, you want honesty? Your father understood me when you didn't. The sentence landed like a slap. Daniel did not move. Vanessa kept going, her voice gaining speed now, as if cruelty might still become control if she delivered enough of it. You were always working, always tired, always talking about responsibilities. Your mother acted like I should be grateful for every little family tradition. Richard listened. He made me feel seen. I looked at Richard. He stared at the table. Seen. Such a fragile little word to carry so much damage. Daniel's voice was flat. So you went to my father. Vanessa did not answer. That was answer enough. Emily put a hand over her mouth. I reached beneath the table and gently touched her knee. Just once, enough to remind her she was not alone. Then Daniel asked the question I had been dreading. The baby? Vanessa looked away. Richard finally sat down. The silence after that was different. It was not confusion anymore. It was calculation, fear, shame trying to choose a hiding place. Daniel's voice lowered. Is there even a baby? Vanessa's face twisted. How dare you? That's not an answer. I told you I'm pregnant. With whose child? She looked at Richard. Not for long. Not even a full second. But Daniel saw it. We all saw it. Richard whispered, Vanessa, don't. Daniel pushed his chair back and stood. I thought he might leave. For a second, I hoped he would. Sometimes the body knows when the heart has heard enough. But he stayed. He placed both hands on the table and leaned forward. I want a paternity test. Vanessa stood so fast her chair hit the wall behind her. No. The word was too quick. Too sharp. Too revealing. Daniel nodded slowly, as if the answer had confirmed what he did not want to know. I see. You see nothing, Vanessa snapped. You're letting them poison you. No, he said. I'm listening for the first time. Richard spoke softly. Son. Daniel turned on him. Do not call me that right now. Richard flinched. It was small, but I saw it. The first real consequence had entered the room. Vanessa grabbed her purse. I'm not staying here to be abused. No one is abusing you, I said. She looked at me with open hatred now. You've wanted this from the beginning. No, I said. I wanted my family intact. There is a difference. She laughed bitterly. Your family was already broken. Richard was miserable. Daniel was blind. Emily was old enough to understand life isn't perfect. I just stopped pretending. I felt Emily stiffen beside me. That was enough. I stood. Slowly. No one else moved. I looked at Vanessa across my dining room table. The table where she had eaten my food for 12 years. The table where my grandchildren had blown out birthday candles. The table where she now stood holding her purse like she was the injured party. You were right about one thing, I said. Her eyes narrowed. This family was not perfect. No family is. But imperfection is not permission. Loneliness is not permission. Wanting attention is not permission. And being young does not give you the right to walk into another woman's life and start measuring the curtains. For the first time that night, Vanessa had no immediate answer. So I continued. You came to my son's dinner and whispered something meant to humiliate me. You thought my age made me weak. You thought my silence meant I would protect your secret for you. You thought a pregnancy, real or not, would make everyone step aside. Richard's face darkened. Daniel stared at the table. Emily was crying silently now. I kept my voice steady. But you forgot something. I have been a wife longer than you have been alive. I have been a mother longer than you have known how to lie well. And I have been underestimated by better people than you. Vanessa's mouth parted slightly. That was the first moment she truly saw me. Not as Daniel's mother. Not as Richard's aging wife. Not as a woman to be pushed aside. Me. Margaret Ellis. I sat down again. The room remained still. Then Daniel picked up his phone. What are you doing? Vanessa demanded. Calling a lawyer. Her face went pale again. Not because of me this time. Because of him. Daniel, she said, her voice suddenly softer. Please don't do that. There it was. The shift. The sweetness returning like a costume being pulled back on. Daniel looked at her. You should have thought about please before my mother had to put proof in an envelope. He stepped into the hallway with his phone. Vanessa stood frozen. Richard did not follow him. Neither did I. Some moments belong to a person alone. Emily wiped her face with both hands. Vanessa looked at Richard, desperate now. Say something. Richard stared at her. Then at me. Then at the envelopes. I could almost see him understanding what Vanessa had already understood. The dinner had not gone the way they planned. Daniel had not turned on me. Emily had not stayed silent. I had not crumbled. And most importantly, Richard's precious signature plan was now sitting in the same room as his betrayed son. When Daniel returned, his expression had changed. Not healed. Not even close. But focused. He placed his phone on the table. I'm taking Emily home with me tonight, he said. Vanessa snapped. She is my daughter too. Emily spoke quietly. I want to go with Dad. Vanessa looked at her as if she had been slapped. Then Daniel turned to me. Mom, I need copies of everything. Richard said, Daniel, don't rush into. No, Daniel said, I rushed into trusting people. I'm done with that. He picked up the photograph again. His hand shook. But he did not put it down. That was when I knew the night had crossed a line none of them could drag it back over. Truth had entered the room. And it had chosen to stay. Daniel did not take Emily home immediately. He stayed at the table for almost another hour. That was the strange thing about truth. People imagine it makes everyone move quickly. They imagine slammed doors, shouted accusations, suitcases dragged down hallways. Sometimes that happens. But sometimes truth makes people sit very still. Daniel sat with the photograph in front of him, one hand resting beside it, as if he were afraid the image might disappear if he stopped guarding it. Emily sat close to him now. Vanessa noticed that. So did I. My granddaughter had moved her chair slightly away from her mother and closer to her father. Only a few inches, but in a family collapsing under its own secrets, a few inches can mean everything. Richard sat at the far end of the table, shoulders bent, looking older than I had ever seen him. Vanessa remained standing. She had put her purse strap over her shoulder twice, then taken it off twice. She wanted to leave, but she also wanted control. And leaving meant surrendering the room to me. She could not stand that. Daniel looked at me. Mom, he said, what else is there? I hated that question. Not because I did not have an answer. Because I had too many. I stood and went to the small cabinet near the china hutch. Inside, under a stack of linen napkins, I had placed another folder before dinner. I took it out and returned to the table. Vanessa's eyes followed the folder. Richard whispered, Margaret. I did not look at him. Not yet. I sat down and opened the folder carefully. There are things I need to show you, I said to Daniel, but I want you to understand something first. I did not collect these because I wanted to hurt you. His face tightened. I know. No, I said softly, you don't, not yet. The room was quiet. I slid the first page toward him. This is a copy of a property valuation for this house. I found it in your father's dresser. Daniel frowned and picked it up. For your house? Yes. He scanned the page, then looked at Richard. Why would you need this? Richard swallowed. It was preliminary. For what? Richard did not answer. So I slid the second page forward. A draft loan agreement. Daniel took it. His eyes moved across the paper. Slow at first, then faster. I watched the moment he saw my name. Margaret Ellis. Spouse. Consent required. He looked up. What is this? Richard finally spoke. It was a business option. Nothing had been signed. That's not what I asked. His voice had changed again. There are stages in a son's disappointment. First confusion, then hurt, then anger. But after anger comes something quieter and more dangerous. Judgment. Daniel was no longer only wounded. He was evaluating. Richard felt it. It was never meant to involve you, he said. Daniel gave a bitter little laugh. You were using Mom's house and Vanessa's LLC. And you think it didn't involve me? Vanessa stepped forward. Don't twist this. The LLC was for a business project. Daniel turned to her. Your business project? Our business project. The word "our" landed badly. I saw Daniel hear it. I saw Richard hear it too. Our, Daniel repeated. Vanessa's mouth tightened. I meant professionally. Emily let out a small sound. Not a laugh. Not quite. More like disbelief escaping before she could stop it. Vanessa turned on her. You have no idea how adult finances work. Emily looked at her mother with wet eyes. I know when people hide things. That silenced Vanessa for 3 whole seconds. I slid the third page across the table. This is the LLC record. Vanessa is listed as a secondary contact. Daniel looked at it. His hand shook once, then stilled. Vanessa, he said, why are you connected to my father's loan paperwork? She lifted her chin. Because Richard needed someone competent to help him organize things. I almost felt embarrassed for her. Not because the lie was bold. Because it was tired. The same shape as every lie she had told. Helpful, misunderstood, responsible, always the only sane person in the room. Daniel stared at her. You were helping my father borrow against my mother's home. No, she snapped. We were exploring options. For what? She did not answer. So Richard did. For a development opportunity. I looked at him then. His eyes met mine for a second, then dropped. A development opportunity, I repeated. He flinched at the calm in my voice. Yes, he said. Is that what you call it now? Margaret, don't. Don't what? Use the same quiet voice you counted on for 41 years? His face hardened. For the first time that night, I saw anger begin to replace fear. Good. Fear hides. Anger reveals. Richard pushed back his chair slightly. I worked my whole life for this family. So did I. I built that business. With my inheritance keeping it alive when it almost failed. Daniel looked at me sharply. What? Vanessa went still. Richard said, that was a long time ago. Yes, I said, long enough for you to hope I had forgotten. I reached into the folder and pulled out the old capital contribution agreement. The paper was a copy, but the signatures were clear. Richard's. Mine. Howard Bennett's. My father's. I placed it in front of Daniel. When the company almost collapsed, my father and I helped your dad secure the funds to keep it running. It was documented, protected, your grandfather insisted. Daniel read the page. Then he looked at Richard. You told me Grandpa never believed in you. Richard's face changed. A small thing, but devastating. Daniel continued. You said he thought you weren't good enough for Mom. You said he made you feel small. Richard rubbed his forehead. He was a difficult man. No, I said. Everyone looked at me. My father was cautious. There is a difference. For years, I had let Richard tell that story his way. Harold Whittaker, the stern father-in-law who never fully trusted him. It had been easier not to correct him. Easier to let Richard keep his pride. But silence, I had learned, can become an accomplice if you let it live too long. My father gave us money because he loved me, I said, and because he wanted our family to survive. He did not humiliate Richard. He protected me. Daniel's jaw tightened. Emily reached for his hand under the table. He let her take it. Vanessa saw that too. Her face sharpened. So this is about money, she said. That's what this has always been about. Margaret doesn't want Richard to have a life because she's afraid of losing control of the assets. I looked at her. No, Vanessa, this is about you whispering at my son's dinner table that you were carrying my husband's child. The room froze. There it was. The sentence. Not hidden anymore. Daniel closed his eyes. Emily began to cry silently again. Richard looked like a man who had been struck without being touched. Vanessa's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, she had no polished version ready. I continued, still calm. You said that to me while Daniel sat 6 feet away from you, celebrating the best news of his career. You said it with my granddaughter at the table. You said it in my family's home. And then you told my husband I had misunderstood a joke. Daniel opened his eyes and looked at Vanessa. Did you say that? She swallowed. It was said in anger. That was not a denial. Daniel understood. So yes. Vanessa's face twisted. You don't know how she treats people. She acts sweet, but she judges everything. I asked if you said it. She looked at him with fury now. Yes. The word fell onto the table like a glass breaking. Daniel leaned back. One small movement. But it felt final. Richard whispered, Daniel, I didn't know she would say it like that. Daniel turned to him slowly. But it was true enough for her to say. Richard said nothing. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen, the clock ticking above the stove, the small sounds of a house still doing its job while the people inside failed one another. Daniel stood. I want both of you to leave. Vanessa blinked. What? He did not look at her first. He looked at Richard. You too. Richard stared at him. This is my home too. No, Daniel said. This is Mom's home, and if half of what I'm seeing is real, you were trying to use it without her understanding. Richard's face reddened. You don't know what you're talking about. Then explain it to an attorney. The room went silent. Daniel turned to me. Mom, Howard has copies? Some. He'll have everything tomorrow. Richard looked genuinely alarmed now. Tomorrow? Yes, I said. I have an appointment. Vanessa grabbed her purse again. You are unbelievable. I looked at her hand on the strap. No, I was unbelievable when I ignored the first insult. When I let you make me feel like a guest in my own family. When I told myself your little comments were stress, or youth, or insecurity, that was unbelievable. I stood then. My knees hurt slightly, but I did not let it show. Tonight, I am simply finished. Vanessa stared at me. Richard stared at the floor. Daniel moved toward Emily. Come on, he said gently. Emily rose. Vanessa's voice cracked. Emily, you are not leaving with him. Emily looked at her mother. Yes, I am. It was not loud. It did not need to be. Daniel placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. Then looked at me. "I'll call you when we get home." I nodded. He hesitated, then crossed the room and hugged me. Not quickly this time. Not the polite hug of a busy son leaving dinner. He held me like he understood. Maybe for the first time. That mothers can be hurt too. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I closed my eyes. Those 2 words were not enough to fix anything. But they were the first honest repair. "I know," I whispered back. When Daniel and Emily left, Vanessa followed them to the front door, pleading in a low voice I could not fully hear. Daniel did not turn around. Emily did not either. The door closed. The house became still. Only Richard, Vanessa, and I remained. Vanessa looked at him. "Do something." Richard looked at me. I could see it then. The man who had once been my husband was waiting for the woman I used to be. The woman who would smooth this over. Lower her voice. Protect his dignity. Delay consequences. I almost pitied him. Almost. "Richard," I said, "you need to pack a bag." His face went blank. "What?" "You heard me." Vanessa's eyes widened. Richard looked around the room as if the walls might defend him. Maggie. The old name. At last. But it arrived too late. I stepped back from it like it was something spoiled. "No," I said, "you don't get to call me that tonight." He swallowed. For a moment, he looked smaller than Vanessa had promised me he was. Not powerful. Not desired. Not reborn into some new life. Just an aging man standing in the wreckage of his own choices. "I have nowhere to go," he said. I looked at Vanessa. "She does." Vanessa's face went white. Not pale this time. White. Because she had wanted my life. But not the burden of carrying the man who came with it. Richard did not pack much. That surprised me, though I don't know why. A man can live in a house for 32 years and still leave it with one overnight bag if he believes he is only leaving temporarily. 2 shirts. A pair of slacks. Medication. Phone charger. The brown leather toiletry case I bought him on our 25th anniversary. I stood in the hallway while he moved around the bedroom. Not because I wanted to watch him suffer. Because I wanted to make sure he understood this was real. Vanessa waited downstairs. I could hear her pacing in the living room, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Every few seconds, the sound stopped, then started again. She was probably texting Daniel, Emily, maybe someone else. But no one came back for her. Richard zipped the bag and looked at me. For a moment, I saw the man I married. Not clearly, not fully, just a shadow of him. The young man who once stood outside my father's house in a cheap suit. Nervous because he wanted to ask permission to marry me. The husband who held Daniel for the first time and cried quietly when he thought no one saw. The father who built a wooden swing set in the backyard and sanded every edge so our son would not get a splinter. That man had existed. I needed to believe that. But he was not the man standing in front of me now. "Maggie," he said softly. I did not answer. His eyes lowered. "Margaret." "Yes." He swallowed. This got out of hand. I almost smiled. Such a small sentence for such a large betrayal. Out of hand. As if it were a spilled cup of coffee. As if he had not let another woman humiliate me in front of our son. As if he had not hidden loan papers with my name typed on them. As if he had not stood in our study at midnight saying they only needed my signature. "No," I said. It got revealed. He looked away. "I never meant for Daniel to be hurt. But you were willing for me to be." His face tightened. "That's not fair." I looked at the bed we had shared for 41 years. The quilt folded at the foot. The 2 lamps. His book on the nightstand. My lotion beside mine. Ordinary things still pretending they belonged to ordinary people. "Fair," I said quietly, "would have been telling me the truth before you planned a life around my silence." He had no answer. Downstairs, Vanessa called his name. Not gently. Not lovingly. Impatiently. Richard flinched. I saw it. And in that small flinch, I understood something that should have brought satisfaction but did not. Vanessa had not freed him. She had only moved him from one kind of unhappiness to another. But that was no longer mine to manage. He lifted the bag. Where am I supposed to go? I looked at him. You chose that before I knew there was a choice. He stared at me for a long second. Then he walked past me. At the top of the stairs. He paused and looked back once. Maybe he expected me to soften. Maybe he expected the woman who had forgiven late nights, sharp words, forgotten anniversaries, and years of emotional distance. That woman had loved him. But she was tired now. And love, without respect, becomes a room with no air. I followed him downstairs. Vanessa stood near the front door, arms crossed, face tight with anger. She did not look like a victorious young woman anymore. She looked trapped beside the consequence she had invited. When Richard reached her, she whispered, "Finally." I heard it. So did he. He did not respond. She glanced at me, trying to recover some of her old sharpness. "This isn't over." "No," I said, "but this part is." Her eyes narrowed. "You think Daniel will keep believing you?" I looked toward the window, where the reflection of the three of us stood in the dark glass. Richard with his bag, Vanessa in her burgundy dress, me in my own hallway, hands calm at my sides. I think Daniel will believe what the truth continues to show him. That silenced her. For a moment. Then she placed one hand on her stomach again. The gesture had lost power. Not because a child does not matter. A child always matters. But because truth matters too. If there is a baby, I said, my voice softer now, then that child deserves honesty before birth, not lies used as a shield. Vanessa's face changed. For 1 second, something like fear passed through her eyes. Real fear. Not of me. Of what came next. Paternity, lawyers, Daniel's questions, Richard's weakness, her own choices no longer wrapped in secrecy. Richard opened the door. Cold night air entered the house. He stepped outside first. Vanessa followed, but at the threshold she turned back. I thought she might say something cruel. One last cut. Instead, she looked past me into the house. At the staircase. The dining room. The warm light above the kitchen. The life she had tried to enter through betrayal. Then she left without a word. I closed the door. The sound was soft. Not dramatic. Just a click. A small sound for the end of a 41-year marriage. I stood there with my hand on the lock. Then I turned it. For the first time in my adult life, I locked Richard out. The house became quiet. Not peaceful yet. But honest. I walked into the dining room. The envelopes were still on the table. The candles had burned low. Plates sat where people had abandoned them. Daniel's chair was pushed back. Emily's napkin lay folded beside her place. I began cleaning. Not because anyone expected me to. Because I needed to reclaim the room. I carried plates to the kitchen. Scraped food into the trash. Ran warm water into the sink. The same motions I had done after hundreds of family dinners. But this time, every plate felt different. I was not cleaning up after a celebration. I was cleaning up after a truth. When I picked up Vanessa's envelope, the photograph slid halfway out. Richard's hand on her waist. I looked at it once more. Then I placed it back inside and set it beside the folder for Howard. Evidence did not need emotion. It only needed safekeeping. At 10:48, Daniel called. I answered on the first ring. "Mom? I'm here." His voice was rough. "We're at my place. Emily's with me." "Good. She's upstairs. I think she's crying." "Let her." There was silence. Then he said, "I don't know what to do." That was the first time all night he sounded like my child again. I sat down at the kitchen table. "You don't have to know tonight. I feel stupid." "You were not stupid. I missed everything. You trusted your wife and your father. That is not stupidity. That is what family is supposed to allow." His breath caught. "I'm sorry I didn't see you, Mom." I closed my eyes. Those words reached a place in me that anger had not touched. I thought of all the dinners where I felt invisible. All the holidays where Vanessa corrected me gently enough to seem polite. All the times Daniel had said, "Mom, she didn't mean it that way." "I know," I said. "I should have listened." "Yes," I said, "you should have. The truth deserved that much." He was quiet. Then I added, "But you are listening now." He exhaled shakily. "What happens tomorrow?" "Tomorrow, I meet Howard. You call your attorney. Emily rests. And none of us make decisions just to stop the pain." He gave a small, broken laugh. "That sounds like you." "No," I said softly. "It sounds like the woman I had to become." After we hung up, I sat alone in the kitchen. The clock ticked above the stove. The apples still sat in the white ceramic bowl. One bruised apple faced upward now. I must have turned it while cleaning without noticing. I looked at it for a long time. Then I did something strange. I did not turn the bruise down. I left it showing. The next few weeks were not easy. Stories like this do not end neatly the moment the guilty people leave the room. Howard filed protective notices. My accounts were separated. The loan agreement died before it could breathe. Richard's attorney called twice, then learned quickly that I would not be handled through guilt. Daniel requested a paternity test through his lawyer. Vanessa fought it. Then delayed. Then cried. Then finally agreed when the court made delay useless. The pregnancy was real. The story she built around it was not. The child was not Daniel's. And when Richard demanded his own test, the truth humiliated him too. The child was not his either. I will not say more about that part. Some truths do not need decoration. Emily stayed with Daniel for a while. She came over often too. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we baked. Sometimes we sat on the porch drinking tea while she stared at the yard and said nothing at all. I learned that silence can heal when it is not forced on you. Richard moved into an extended stay hotel at first. Later, I heard he rented a small apartment near Aurora. He called me several times. I answered only when Howard advised it was necessary. Once, he left a message. "I miss home." I listened to it once. Then deleted it. Because he did not miss me. He missed the version of life where I carried the weight and called it love. As for Vanessa, she disappeared from family gatherings before anyone officially removed her. That was her way. When the room no longer reflected her as innocent, she stopped entering it. Months later, Daniel came to dinner. Just him and Emily. Lily and Mason came the following weekend, full of questions children should never have to ask. We answered gently, carefully, without poisoning them against anyone. But without lying either. That Sunday, I made the same apple pie. Lily picked the crumb topping off first. Mason tried to sneak 2 rolls into his lap. Daniel laughed for the first time in months. Not fully. Not freely. But enough. After dinner, he helped me wash dishes. I washed. He dried. For a moment, the old rhythm returned, but changed. Richard was not there. Vanessa was not there. The empty spaces were real. But they did not swallow the room. Daniel picked up a plate and said, "I used to think keeping peace meant avoiding the truth." I handed him another dish. So did I. He looked at me. "What do you think now?" I looked toward the dining room table. No envelopes. No secrets. Just crumbs, napkins, and 2 half-empty glasses of iced tea. I think peace built on silence is just fear with better manners. Daniel nodded slowly. Then he said, "I love you, Mom." This time, I did not wonder if he meant it. "I love you too." That night, after everyone left, I walked through the house turning off lights. Living room. Hallway. Dining room. Kitchen. At the front door, I paused. I remembered Vanessa on the porch, whispering that Richard wanted a new life. She had been right about one thing. A new life did begin after that family dinner. Just not the one she planned. I went upstairs, changed into my nightgown, and sat for a while beside the bedroom window. The maple tree outside had filled with leaves. Spring had finally arrived without asking anyone's permission. For 41 years, I thought my story was being a wife. For even longer, I thought my story was being a mother. I was both. Proudly. But I was also something else. A woman. A whole woman. One who could be wounded and still wise. Betrayed and still dignified. Left alone and still not be lost. That night, I slept in the center of the bed. Not on my side. Not leaving space for a man who had chosen elsewhere. Right in the center. And for the first time in a long time, the house did not feel empty. It felt like mine.